we see a man hanging on a few spears, saying that it was a beautiful dream, and he himself was destroying it, devouring it and destroying it, but unfortunately, the man didn't finish his sentence because he died before he could finish it. Another man looks at his corpse and says, "At last he's dead, a miserable ending, befitting the most insidious of villains." Then he turns his back and walks away from the body. This is the final scene in the novel, The End of the Villain. We see a man named Nam Hyun, who wrote the novel, sighing. He says that the death of the world's most powerful villain means that his series is coming to an end, and the next chapter will be the conclusion. He says that writing a novel he didn't want to write was a really miserable experience. Hyun starts to stretch, saying that at least he'll be able to finish everything first, and that he should leave any regrets behind. Suddenly, someone starts banging on his door, and he's surprised and asks who it could be at this hour. He says it's too late for any delivery, and goes to the door to ask who's there. But as he gets closer, he suddenly stops. He says it could have been someone drunk, and decides to go back to sleep. As he goes back, he spots a piece of paper flying through the air. He asks where the paper came from, and when he starts reading it, it says, "This is a gift, ask for what you want when you are in need." Hyun wonders what it means, and suddenly, a dark, red, and sinister aura begins to seep out of it. He sees the corpse of the villain he was writing about standing right in front of him. He chokes up, and the villain says, "This is my way of dying. I spent a lot of time and effort, 10 years honing my sword to avenge those who killed my family, lost my girlfriend and friends, gave up a lot of things, and still failed. And you, Hyun, know this better than anyone." Hyun asks him what he means by failed, and he starts to get confused. The man extends his hand towards him. Hyun screams and the aura starts to swallow him. The man says, "Please, do it instead, and I'll watch you do it." Things around him start to distort. We see the body of a man sleeping on a bed, slowly opening his eyes. Hyun suddenly gets up and wonders if he's fainted or not, but he sees a strange place in front of him. He asks, "What's going on here?" Then he looks down at his trousers and says, "What's with the pants?" He turns to the mirror and asks himself in amazement, "What's going on?" When he looks at his face, he says, "The ominous crimson hair, the devious mouth, and the narrow eyes that hide every trace of emotion." And he realizes exactly what happened. He enters someone else's body, and not just any body, the body of Arsene, Adele, the most powerful villain in the novel. What's worse, he's only a few days away from being assassinated. Next, we learn that Arsene is a half-demon. The Arsene family is a mixed bloodline descended from demons, and thanks to the power in their blood, they were once one of the greatest families in the empire, but they fell because of 6 specialized families. Currently, Arsene's bloodline is only as good as him. This is his background, his story, and the reason why he is evil. He tried to take revenge but failed, which is why he came here. In the next day, he will be killed by the knights of the 6 families. Hyun opens his status screen and says that in terms of talent, Arsene Adele was one of the most talented characters in his novel, but his talent doesn't compare to that of the main protagonists. No matter how charismatic the villain is, his intention was never to let him defeat the hero. On top of that, he is currently unable to control his mana and can't believe that the story he wrote to make the villain scary is now spinning around his neck. He spots the paper flying above his bed and stands up, stunned. He recognizes it and says it's the one that got him into the story in the first place. He had completely forgotten about it. Even if it doesn't do much good, he says, he's in a situation where he can't be conditioned. He thinks he was told to ask when he needs something. When he starts reading the scroll, he feels confused and asks himself why it is empty and where is the text that was on it, because there is nothing he can do in this body. Suddenly, a word appears on the scroll and addresses him as the author. She says, if he doesn't know how to use the gift, he answers, yes or no. Hyun gets nervous and says, what does he mean by author? And then realizes that this is the real Adele. Adele asks him to simply write, yes or no, on the paper. Hyun writes, yes, while ignoring Adele's attempt to understand the situation. The scroll then begins to create a new text, explaining how to use the information and purchase, assuring him that she will answer anything he writes on the paper, and that some questions don't require a wish and others do. Adele says that the more important the question is, the higher the wish island. Hyun asks how he can go back to his real world, and Adele replies, that's impossible. Hyun replies that he wasn't counting on it in the first place, but he needs to know how to use mana and the characteristics of his body, because he has to deal with urgent matters first. Adele replies that the question doesn't need to be asked, and that controlling mana and using body properties has already been discussed, and asks if that's okay with him. Hyun says yes, and starts smiling, as he says he can feel the mana. The first characteristic is called dark cover, which is the ability to take away the 5 senses from a person. We see him making a small vortex on his hand, and he says that normally it would be much larger than that, but even in this form, it's very useful. The next power is the ability to bind opponents with his aura, called Killing Intent. It works, but only trained knights or soldiers can resist it, but it will affect ordinary people. Now all he needs to do is understand Adele's main talent, which is called switching places. This is simply the ability to switch places with any object he chooses, and is considered the best assassination skill of all. He starts using the first part of the skill called identification, and says that he can only identify an area of about 20 square yards, which is weak compared to his power in the novel, but with continued training, it will become a very powerful skill. He decides to try it on the armor in his room, and he starts to move towards it and create a link between them. Then he uses the second part of the skill called transition, and he and the suit of armor switch places in an instant, causing him to stumble and fall into the wall. He says he's not going to get it right the first time, but he's willing to try it 100 times if necessary, because he's racing against time to survive, as the 6 family's knights are on their way to kill him. At this moment, the main gate of the family's palace opens, and the knights enter. The servants look worried, and one of them asks where Adele is, and he replies that he's in his room. We recognize the commander of the Lion County Knights, whose name is Feltz. He asks how he's doing, and is told that Adele hasn't moved in days, and Feltz looks a little disappointed. Then he and his men burst into the room. We see Adele. Adele says, Feltz sure doesn't want to let a little kid live. Feltz replies, nonsense, and then orders his men to finish him off. One of them steps forward and says, yes, sir. But Adele uses the first ability of the switch places skill and switches places with the soldier's weapon to stab directly into the soldier's neck, shocking Feltz and his guards. Feltz orders his men to kill him immediately. Adele takes the opportunity to escape through the window. As he falls, he throws his dagger to the ground, then makes a connection with him and moves to avoid the damage of the fall. He says he has to get to the forest and starts running towards it. Feltz orders his men to chase him. Inside Arsen's forest, we see him exhausted, sobbing and saying, even if I'm lucky enough to escape the knights and make it back to the area, I'm not going to make it. He decides to open a portal in the forest to the demonic realm, which has recently been badly damaged by a war with humans. He says that if he shows them enough talent, they might accept him. But there was another issue. Before he could explain it, he heard the sound of horses and wondered why they were following him so fast. We hear Feltz ordering his men to spread out and circle around him. He then goes on to say that he doesn't know the exact location of the gate, but he's sure he's close to it. Then he steps on a tree branch that makes a sound, and immediately realizes that something is wrong. That's when a huge attack with a green aura rips through the forest. Feltz says he was hiding here. We see Adele downloading his teleportation ability and saying that he's only used it once or twice, so he needs to hurry up and find the portal. He then adds, maybe there's no other option. He then asks the real Arsene where exactly the portal to the demonic realm is located. The latter replies that the information has a price, and that he must pay either 100 gold coins or an artifact with a rank of sacred relic or higher. Adele replies that he doesn't have anything like that right now. Suddenly, an attack from behind him sends him flying through the air, and he rolls to the ground before crashing into a tree trunk. Feltz approaches him and asks, did you run away because you want to live? He then adds, you're going to die here, whether you want to or not. Adele responds, don't laugh at me, I'm not going to die here, because there is only one way left, and I decided to try it, whether it works or not. Feltz asks him, are you going to fight back? He says, you are still the master of the family after all. Adele responds sarcastically, asking him why he's acting so dignified when a bunch of adults are chasing one kid, and suggesting that he change careers to nanny because that's what he's best suited for. He then laughs, and adds that it could be difficult for him, even on his own. Feltz is easily angered by the sarcasm and says that he was going to get rid of him painlessly, but now he's going to stab him in the heart with the sword that the Count Lion gave him. Adele, realizing that this is his chance, lifts herself up and strikes Feltz's sword, and a message pops up, thanking him for paying the price, saying that the amount paid was a little too much, but that she will guide him to the gate immediately. Adele is happy that his adventure was successful, while Feltz is shocked and confused as his sword disappears from his hand. Adele looks to his side and sees a huge red light, so he uses his teleportation ability to get closer to it. Feltz sees him walking and yells for him to stop, but Adele doesn't want to do that and can't believe he followed him this far in the first place. He's standing in front of the gate to the demonic realm, but Feltz cuts down a tree and uses it as a weapon, saying he won't let him walk. Then he throws it towards him with great force, and when it comes close to the back of his head, Adele smiles and transports himself through the gate. Feltz stays where he is, angry that Adele was able to get away from him. Not only that, but Adele says goodbye to him and says, "See you later, Mr. Feltz," and Feltz yells, "Damn." After a while, Adele wonders how long it's been since we've seen him eat a piece of dried meat. He says that after he passed through the gate, he found himself in a dungeon. A man-made dungeon called the Place of Secret Satanic Arts. He wonders what would put dried meat on a stone bed in the first place, and if there was anyone guarding a treasure in this place, not to mention that there is a barrier to prevent attacks, with a stone guard in front of it. Adele doesn't know what kind of big family built this place, but it's full of strange things, and the guard is terrifying to look at, and if he tried to confront him now, he would be completely destroyed. Suddenly, the paper starts to light up and says that this is the only time he won't be punished, but warns him that he can't offer things he doesn't have. Adele responds sarcastically that the man is crazy, but that means he'll do it again. Then he notices something about a part of the hedge that looks strange. He reaches out and puts his palm on it, and says that he can feel things like this only because he's next to Adele's body. A voice says that he doesn't have the right, that he thinks it's a mechanism that disables the barrier, and that it's a shame, he has to find another way to get out of here. He sees a piece of stone on the ground and says it was dropped by the guard, and if it's stone, it could work in his favor. He starts attaching himself to it, then moves and switches places with the stone. Now that he's moved through the barrier, he says, "That's it, it really worked." The guard's eyes are wide open. The scene changes to another place where we see a huge castle, and the sky looks amazing, almost like an eclipse of the Sunday. There is someone on the ground laughing, while someone else is watching them from above. This is Creed, the head of a large clan in the demonic world, specifically the Paris clan. Creed says that the place is really crowded, maybe because his daughter is preparing to invade the mid-level hidden domain soon, and it's a very complicated subject. If she succeeds, she gets the right to enter Sight, a school in the demonic realm. But even if he orders her to fail, she will disobey his orders, because she doesn't see any way to avenge the humans who killed her mother except by entering the Sight. He says she is very weak, and has no idea if she can survive in a place where only demon-like bastards gather. And then he sighs anxiously. A maid comes in and says there's something wrong. He asks her what she's making such a fuss about, and she apologizes and says she just wanted to let him know that there's someone in the hidden domain right now. He asks her if she's sure, and she says yes, and there's no sign that they opened the door to get in, which is what's confusing everyone. Creed asks if they know who this person is, and she replies that he touched the entrance mechanism from the air, and that's all they know so far, and no one knows who he island. Creed says he could have been forcibly summoned through the portal that was created during the Human-Demon War. He then tells the maid that he's sure to die, so there's no need to worry about him, and they should focus on his daughter's test preparations. She says, "Understood," and Creed looks out the window again and says that if things go well, he could get a good pawn, provided he dies in the invisible realm. We're back to Adele as he switches places with the stone and screams that he was going to die. This means that even if the barrier disappeared, he would still be in trouble if he got out. But he suddenly stands up and says, "Wait, the guard is also made of stone." He decides to give it a try. He starts doing his marking ability, attaches himself to the guard, smiles as he says, "I did it," and then switches places with him. The guard is surprised and starts attacking the barrier, trying to get out. Adele says he's going to die if he keeps doing this, and now he just needs to find the exit. But he suddenly stops again because there is another barrier, and this time on the other side there is a giant bug. He says it's important at every stage, and that it's more dangerous than the wolf. But as expected, the insect is also made of stone, and he could leave it on the other side as well. In this stage, the ground begins to collapse, and Adele begins to replace parts of the terrain. He says it's pretty easy as long as he has a place to move to in the trap area. He lands safely on the other side and is greeted by people at the end. Adele is surprised that they are welcoming an intruder and says, "This looks like the boss's quarters," and asks if anyone is there. He comes closer to see a skeleton in armor, and Adele recognizes him as the Death Knight. He says that based on his strength, he looks like Feltz. The Death Knight tells Adele that he respects him for getting to this point. In this moment, Adele connects himself to him and then switches places with him. The Death Knight is still trying to finish his sentence, while Adele is wondering where the treasure island. When Adele sees the treasure, he says it's bigger than he thought. There is also an ornament with a black dragon engraved on it. Adele says the ornament looks familiar and wonders if he has seen it before. Then he thinks that among the higher-ranking demonic families that represent the 7 deadly sins, the black dragon represents evil and pride, which is the 7th sin related to the Paris family. He says that if he were to catch him, he would be killed without a word. He opens the box and says that since things have come to this, he just wants to get rid of it and escape, and that there must be something useful in it. But as soon as he opens it, something jumps out of the box and sticks to his face, and he starts to choke. Then, it goes straight into his nostrils, and he starts to come back, shining and holding his his head, screaming in pain. Then we see a lot of blood flying and hear Adele sobbing as we see his eyeball on the floor. He asks how long he has been unconscious and why his eyeball is on the ground. He draws his sword and looks at his reflection and finds that his eye has turned black and purple. He asks if the liquid that attacked him is the one he has in mind, and starts looking at its characteristics, and we see that he has acquired a new trait called Suburbia's Eye, which gives him a tremendous improvement in kinetic vision, and this effect kicks in after he kills an enemy. He says that with this ability, he will never lose to groups of enemies weaker than him, and that he may have made the right decision when he came to this place. He gets up and says that he has gotten everything he needs, so he has to go now. He says he was so busy with the box that he didn't realize there was another door behind it. He wonders what he's going to do. He's made a lot of noise and there must be a lot of soldiers waiting for him, and he'll be killed if he gets out. He wonders if he needs to kneel faster than the speed of light, to not get killed immediately. First of all, if they find out I'm an arson, they'll kill me even if I beg for mercy, so I have to hide my family badge, he says. The dead knight then screams and orders the door to be opened immediately, much to Adele's dismay, and adds that, Her Highness is coming quickly, so open the door. Adele wonders what this means, and then speculates that the dried meat on the bed could be because this is a field created by the higher-ups for training purposes. He says he needs to find out who owns the field, because he stole the reward they were supposed to take, and they'll cut him to pieces if they catch him. Therefore, he asks the scroll for the closest character to him. The scroll replies that the information has a price, and he must pay something worth 100 pieces of gold or an artifact with a rating of relic or higher. He wonders what else he can pay, and decides to sacrifice part of his magic power, paying 100 of his maximum magic power. He says it's going to be hard, but he can make up for it later if he lives. The scroll agrees to the deal and starts taking his energy, then tells him that the closest person to him is Renee, Creed's youngest daughter, and we see her coming towards him. Adele says his life is over. It's something the Paris family did to train the little girl, and the Eye of Suburbia was her supposed reward when it ended. Since Renee has enough power in the family, she will tear the guards apart like butter and show up in front of him. And that's exactly what she does. We see her kill the dead knight in one fell swoop, and then stare at Adele. He says he's going to do it. She points her sword at him and asks him to identify himself. He gets down on one knee and congratulates her on making it through the field, and says she's finally worthy. She launches a killing intent and orders him to explain immediately. He says the president ordered him to be her guardian, adding that their eyes met, but she didn't recognize the Eye of Pride. She asks if they really sold him out like that, and he tells her that, despite his appearance, he is very clever and intends to use Rini to get out of here. She started laughing, and he wondered if she didn't trust him. He switched places with her sword and approached her in an instant. This took her by surprise, and she appeared, holding his wrist. He said he thought he would be useful in protecting her. She immediately withdrew her hand and looked very angry, but she pulled herself together and laughed it off. He said it was good that she got over it. Adele then said she had to leave and go to the president immediately because he was expecting her. She said, okay, and he said he was going to finish the rest of his duties because he had to get out of there as soon as possible. When he opened the door, he said he would make sure he wasn't late. Renee froze, and her father, Creed, appeared in front of her. Creed started laughing and gave off a strong aura. Adele said it was bad and asked what brought Creed here, realizing he would kill him if he found out he had taken Supriya's eye. But he asked himself why Creed didn't react. Creed asked her if she had made it through the sphere, and she said yes, sweating with anxiety. Creed said it was fine and asked her to walk behind him. Adele wondered what he was thinking and started to walk behind them as well. He told himself there was no way he could to escape their scrutiny, and he had nothing to offer the paper, which meant he couldn't use its power. Finally, they reached the palace. Creed stood up and told everyone to go home. He told Adele to stay here and that it would be returned to him afterward. Adele thought to himself that this might be his chance to walk away, but sensing that someone was watching him from the trees, he said, no problem, I'll stay here. In Creed's office, Renee appeared standing in front of him. He told her that she had completed his last mission and asked her if she really wanted to enter the training facility. Yes, she said, so he looked out the window and asked her what she thought of him. The question took her by surprise, and she wondered how Adele had gotten so close to her so quickly. He smiled and said he thought it was interesting. Then he told her that now that she had proven her worth, she could go to site as she wanted. She was very happy and thanked him. After I walked away, he said that he thought Adele would die the first time he entered the field. But he lived and even got the Eye of Supriya, which changed Renee's opinion of him, so he definitely deserved to use it. As for Adele, he was just wondering how long he was going to stay here. Then, at sunset, we saw Adele being led by a servant. The servant told Creed that he had found him. Creed was sitting behind his desk looking at him. Adele was asking himself what was going on in his head and asked him why he was still alive. Creed smiled, called him an asshole, and said he had cheated his daughter well. He then emitted a very strong purple aura that squeezed Adele so hard that he couldn't breathe. He fell to the ground, saying that he knew he wasn't going to kill him. Creed immediately withdrew his aura and said, "That's interesting." Adele said his energy is really amazing. Creed told him he was very quick-witted and asked him his name, and Adele introduced himself. Creed then raised his hand and wrapped an aura around it that made Adele feel like he was flying through the air and very close to him. Adele asked him what he wanted from him. Creed said for him to open his bug, and a small snake appeared to fly towards him. Creed said he just wanted to finish what he was telling his daughter, and the snake started crawling down his throat. Creed then said that if he had any more thoughts, the venom would tear his heart out. He added that he would prepare a place for him to sit, and that he should wait until he was followed. He then ordered him to walk away, but Adele wondered what this was all about. He was taken to the house, and the butler told him that he would be staying here from today. Adele explains how he became dependent on this house because of Creed's wishes, but he is grateful that at least he is allowed to live there. However, he feels he is being taken advantage of. Creed partially admits it, so it could be a good situation. But more importantly, he needs to get rid of the need in his chest. He says he doesn't know if it's going to work or not, as he ties it up and replaces it with air. He says it worked as well as he expected, which means the need wasn't moving. He's relieved that it's not active, and adds that if it had failed, it would have been horrible really. Knowing that Creed would notice if he killed D, he asks himself what to do. The creature started to open its eyes. Adele said that since it had woken up because the mana that had been feeding it had been cut off, it had to eat it. He began to pull him with the tip of his finger, telling him that this was all he could eat, and that he had no choice but to be satisfied in this way. He started talking to him and telling him to go back to sleep, which he did and curled up in the little bed he had made for him. He sighed and said he was finally able to relax, asking himself how much longer he could take it, and feeling like he was about to collapse. He opened his status screen again and said he needed to check it. His spatial teleportation ability is now at the next level, but the issue is the amount of mana because compared to the heroes, it's just a drop in the ocean. He asks himself how to increase it and what he should do, then thinks there's a way. The next day, we see Renee telling him that she doesn't like it. Adele asked her what she meant, and she said it's been 3 days since he hired a bodyguard for her. Her reactions to him have always been cold. When she was young, her personality was playful, but it changed after she lost her mother at the hands of humans. And as a writer, Adele feels sorry for her. One of the servants called for them and said that Mr. Creed wanted to see them. The reason Mr. Creed wants to see them must have something to do with Renee joining Sect. Even though she passed the field test, Creed won't let her go. Creed tells her that Sect is not an easy place, and with her abilities, she will die there after a while, without being able to avenge her mother. Adele feels like he shouldn't be here, and Renee is starting to feel depressed. Creed then said that if Adele went with him as a bodyguard, he would let her enter the academy. Adele shook her head no. Adele wonders why she hates him so much. He explains that Sect is an academy in the demon world where all the elite kids from that world gather. It's basically a demon academy, and has always been at odds with the imperial school that the protagonist attended. In the course of the novel, many students die, including Rennie. It's the worst place where death seems inevitable for everyone. Adele said he didn't understand why a designer would go to a place like this if it were her, but he shrugged and said it could be the best place to gather strength. He knew most of the major incidents that would happen between the two schools, the imperial school and the Sect, and decided to give it a try. He told Creed he had a request. Creed looked at him, and Adele said that if he was going to be dragged there, he should get as much out of it as he could, and asked for something to do with mana. Creed laughed and said he thought he was going to ask him to remove his chest instead. Adele said he must not let him know that the poison in his body had already disappeared. Renee noticed his trembling and wanted to call him an arrogant asshole, but he said it wasn't too much to ask and he'd hear him out. He then asked Renee to walk, and she bowed and walked, but as she walked, she glared at him. Adele wondered why she hated the idea of going with him so much, and if Creed could give him an elixir or an artifact, he wouldn't be a monster. Creed said she was a treasure that family members could react to with sensitivity, so he ordered his daughter to leave. Adele was surprised that it was a family treasure. Creed told him that he knew the amount of mana he had was very low, and because he would die instead of his daughter, this was the least he could do for him. He then asks him to come closer, because Creed is going to pass on the Paris family's mana cultivation technique to Adele himself. Adele never expected this. Creed began to recite a hymn and said, "Demon King, grant your servant clarity of mind in the midst of chaos. Bless us with true relics, and do not let thousands of demons go hungry, but do not put them to the test." Adele sighed after the short sermon and transportation ceremony was over. Creed said that any normal person would have lost their mind after hearing the sermon, and that Adele is truly a special person. Thanks to this cultivation technique, his mana would be granted directly by the Demon Lord, and he would be able to get everything he wished for. Adele is surprised to learn that the source of his power is the Demon Lord. Creed told him that his family is related to the 7 deadly sins. Adele asked what they meant, and Creed said that after he planted the worm's poison in his body, it didn't matter if he was a spy or not. Adele said he didn't think he made the arson family part of the 7 deadly sins. Creed told him he could walk away now. Out in the woods, we saw Adele meditating on a rock. He said he was practicing here because his mana could get out of control. He began to feel the energy swirling around him, so he addressed the demon lord. He explains to himself that once he accepts the demonic energy, he won't be able to use human mana again, but he has no choice anyway. The demon lord looks down at him with red eyes and calls him a hybrid. Adele said, "That can't possibly mean what he thinks it means." The demon lord replied that he didn't think Adele had the blood of a child, but that he looked like a traitor. Adele asked him, "Are you the demon lord?" He replied, "Yes," and said that the world calls him the Lord of Pride. Adele asked him if he was going to kill him, and the ruler replied that if he was, Adele would have died the moment he spoke, but for some reason, he didn't want to kill him. Adele was surprised but relieved. The demon lord said he sensed that Adele was burdened with the same sin as he was, and felt a strange familiarity with him, adding that he would give him a mark of distinction because he was walking the same path. This sign indicates that he will carry his power, but he must be careful not to lose control because of pride. Adele said that since he borrowed the power of the demon lord, he got 3 extra lines thanks to the mark, and the mark is a tattoo, and if it continues like this, his whole body will be covered in tattoos. Sensing someone behind him, he spun around to see who it was, only to find Brainy watching him from behind a tree. He asked himself what had brought her here and if she had heard him, but she blushed and called him a dark priest. Adele thought to himself, "She's got it all wrong. We're moving into his house." Adele says it's been a month since he took the mark of the demon lord, and his money has skyrocketed. Even though he trained hard, I can't believe his energy has doubled in such a short period of time. It's probably because of his focus, and in a few years, his power will reach an insane level. In his current state, he could even conquer the invisible realm, but I wonder why Renee is practicing at home instead of going to the training ground. He called out to her, she looked at him and asked him what he wanted, then welcomed him with respect, which made him uncomfortable. He told her, "It's okay that you're not avoiding me anymore," but she took it the wrong way and thought he was a priest. Fortunately, she didn't overhear the conversation between him and the demon lord, but if she treated him as if he were her superior, there would be terrible rumors in the family. He called her again, and to her surprise, he told her that he understood what she was thinking, but he asked her to treat him like she used to before. She tried to explain that she couldn't, but he told her that he was just following Creed's orders to protect her and that she should feel free to deal with him. She told him she would try, and immediately told him to go get some water. He asked her to repeat what she said, and she replied that she was repeating what he said, that he told her to take it easy on him when she was tired and thirsty after the training. He commented, as expected from the prideful family, her manner suddenly changed. She ordered him to hurry up, and he said, "There's no way I'm going to do what you want for hours." After a while, we see her drinking water. Adele says that he needs to hurry up and take control of the field, but Rinny won't let him, and he'll have time to act before the main character goes into the demon world before him, and he needs these treasures to be able to live in sight. He called her back and asked her about her preparations for enrolling in sight. She asked him why he was suddenly interested, and he told her that she would meet all kinds of evil people there, and he asked because he was worried about her. She replied that she had everything ready. He asked, "Are you sure?" He suggested she double-check because he didn't want her to get in trouble for forgetting something important. She wondered what he was trying to get at and asked him to get to the point. He told her that he was just worried about her because she was under his protection, but she accused him of lying and asked him what he was trying to do behind her back. That's when he realized his trick wasn't working on her. She began to wonder if he was fed up with her. He told himself that things were getting worse, so he told her that he had heard about a domain in the area and was planning to control it, all for her safety. She started to think about it, and he hoped she would believe him. Suddenly, she said she remembered what she had forgotten. He asked her to get back to him, and she said, "Heating." He asked her what she meant, and she drew her sword and said that she had not yet warmed up and that she was going to go with him to the field, and that they could finish one day if it was soon. Then, we learn that the domain is called the Domain of the Immortals, and says it used to be ruled by necromancers, but now it's full of ghost soldiers after the necromancers died in the war between humans and demons. Renee said she knew that. Adele said that's enough to worry Renee. It could be at least an upper mid-level domain. The number of soldiers has increased, so helping her wouldn't be a bad idea. It's just that moving them together would make it harder for him to escape the palace, and the news would reach Crete immediately. It's better not to leave if it's a burden on you, and if the president finds out, he said, but she interrupted him and said, no problem, I know a secret exit. They went to a fence and we saw a hole underneath it, and she said, is it? He commented that she looked like she knew the place well, so she was quiet for a while, but he knew she often escaped from here. He said it would be better to walk away before someone spotted us, and she agreed. When they got outside, they headed toward a mountain range. Adele asked her what Fatal had done. She looked confused. He realized he could be mistaken and said he had no reason to leave the place because he didn't know the area around them very well. She replied that they were almost there and were just counting down the next chain. He realized that this meant they were not far away, and she said, yes. They stood up suddenly, and then he said, it looks like we're here. He and she looked around and saw nothing but ruins. She said, damn the son of Spyros. He realized she was cursing, which is the meaning of the word in their world, and added that he had to hide from Renee that he is a descendant of Arsine at all costs, and that he is the only one who knows the way to the field. He said they could get in if they dug here, and she agreed. He thought he had written that the entrance was under the largest stone statue, and that the soldiers, whose bodies were rotting, were protecting the land. He saw a symbol on the ground and said, that must be the entrance. He asked, shall I go first? She said she would go first. When they came down, we saw torches on the walls, and the light was brighter than he expected. Look ahead, she said, and they saw a church, which meant they were in the right place. Adele said it was very different from the Paris area, and he bet there were at least 100 graves here. Renee told him it was time to go, and Adele pulled out a small dagger and said, okay. A skeleton started crawling out of the ground, but it wasn't alone. There were skeletons all around them. Adele said, I'll give it to you, and she said, okay. She took a deep breath and began to release her aura, darting between the soldiers and breaking them to pieces. He realized it was a good choice to go with her, and added that there must be a necromancer at the back of the crowd. She said, okay, and ran towards them, and he said he would catch up with her soon. The broken bones of the soldiers began to shake and remodel themselves in front of her. They're coming back to life, she exclaimed in surprise. We heard the necromancer say, she must be very brave to come in here, and then he ordered his soldiers to finish off the intruders. I realized they would still come back, and asked what they would do. Adele said it was because of the drug and told her to stop and keep going. I asked him what he meant, but all of a sudden there was an attack. But he cut off the skeleton's head and killed it, then said he had an easy way to get rid of it. She said, I see, and charged straight at the necromancer. The necromancer screamed and ordered his soldiers to stop them. Adele said they just needed to get to him and everything would be over. They just needed to destroy his energy ball, adding that he would finally be able to use the new ability he got from his newly developed switching skill. A giant skeleton soldier appeared in front of Rennie, and he realized that it wasn't going to be easy. He called at her, but she screamed and lunged and pierced it with one blow, destroying it completely. Adele was shocked by this, and used the locate skill to fix himself on the soldier's head, then switched positions to get closer to the necromancer, and while flying through the air, he said that the new ability allows him to switch places between objects. We watched as he pointed his sword and activated the ability, and the ball began to leave the necromancer's hand and landed in Adele's hand, who said, that's pretty cool. The summoner screamed in disbelief, but Adele crushed the ball with his energy. How did this happen? He asked in disbelief as the soldiers all began to fade away. Adele said, we did it, ma'am, and looked ecstatic. Adele said that all the tragedy happened because of what he wrote, and that he really hoped he could rest in peace now. Renee called him and asked him if there was anything else to do, and he told her, this is the time for the reward, and he finally got what he needed. One of them is a dagger called Dark Fang, which turns darkness into mana and provides with agility and speed in dark places. The other is a ring called Eternal Moon, an object that absorbs mana sensitivity and moonlight. Good, Adele said, adding that now he can use his darkness-related attribute to its fullest. He then said that the ring was nice, but he didn't need it, and offered to let her take it while he took the dagger. To which she said, okay. He said, in that case. Suddenly, he grabbed her hand and started putting the ring on her index finger. We saw her start to blush and tremble, because she was so nervous. He wondered why she was reacting like that, and wondered if rings had any other meaning to demons. He asked her what she thought, and at that moment we saw the ring around her finger and she said, this is amazing. He said he was pleased that she liked it, and then said, now that I've taken out the boss, I'll take all the gold. But she put her sword right next to him and gave him a sharp look. He laughed, and said he meant he would distribute it equally to the last millimeter. After they finished cleaning the field, they returned to the palace, where he spent his time doing Rennie's chores or training mana. A month had passed, and we saw that he had gained more mana in that time. He said that his progress was very satisfactory, as 350 mana points is considered to be in the top half of the rankings in the demon world. A day later, Creed summoned Adele and Renee to his office. He said it was time for them to enter Sect. Creed went on to say that they would be heading to the capital today to enter the academy, and asked if they had finished their preparations, to which they both replied, yes. He told them to leave now, as he didn't see the need for a farewell party. Renee hesitated for a moment and then bowed to her father, and Adele also bowed and said he would walk with her. Creed called out to him and said he hoped for a good result. Adele said, yes, and then stood watching as they got into the car. The driver said they were going to leave right away, and Creed was still watching from above. Adele looked up and said, he said he didn't want to say goodbye, but I guess even demons feel the need to say goodbye to their children. Despite his worries about the future, decided that things had come to this point, and he was going to fulfill his goals at Sect. As the horses set off, the road was a bit bumpy. Adele noticed that Rainey hadn't said a word since they started walking, and wondered if he had done something wrong. She shook her head and thought to herself, I didn't like him at first because he was a little creepy, but he's prettier than I expected. Adele laughed nervously and said, it's nice today, isn't it? She told herself that even though his speech and behavior are not stoic, he is not as strong as he should be. She wondered to herself if he was really a priest or not. As for Adele, all he wanted to know was why she was calling him that. She sighed and told herself that this was a ridiculous idea. She had seen him speak to the demon lord herself, so she shouldn't doubt him. Adele thought to herself that he must have done something wrong. Then she looked at the ring on her finger, and her cheeks began to blush as she looked out the window. She said the ring represented an eternal covenant, which is what it means when someone of the opposite sex wears a ring on their finger in the demonic realm. Since he did it without saying anything, she wondered what kind of covenant it was, and was curious. Adele called out to her and said they would arrive in an hour, earlier than expected. She seemed a little annoyed that he hadn't said anything more than that, but she shrugged it off and said, I'm going. Adele wondered if he had done something wrong or not. She told him to shut up because she wanted to take a nap. They finally arrived, and Adele was looking at the city, where the streets were crowded with people. He said that this is the capital of the demon world, and it doesn't look much different from the human world, kind of medieval. But there are differences, like the people here have horns and other physical differences. The elite demons have visible tattoos, and one of them has a tattoo on his neck, just like Adele. Renee asked him why he was walking so leisurely and asked him to hurry up. He said, yes, and then asked, where are they going now? She told him that the entrance exam is at noon in 2 days, but they have to register first. He said that if they still had 2 days left, they should be in the capital by then, but she said she wasn't in the mood. He wondered why everything here was so awkward, and said it could be because she was homesick. He was about to ask her, but she interrupted him and said that there was no time for nonsense, and they had to go register. He told himself that he thought her story was that she had been out of the house since her mother died, and that he couldn't understand her. As they were walking, he said that Sect is amazingly shaped and must be 3 times bigger than any normal university. One egg-shaped person told Lahad that he was registered and had to return in 2 days, and then called the next one. Adele said they were here to enroll. The egg-headed man looked confused and asked Adele if he was a demon because he didn't look like one. He asked him angrily if he was half demon and was seriously applying, and went on to say that they might have lost the war, but he wondered what kind of place he thought he was dealing with. Adele replied that he envisioned a bleak future if someone as ugly as him treated him that way. The egg-headed man continued his insults, so Renee asked him what was going on. He looked at her, saw her horn, and said, unbelievable. I didn't expect to see someone from the 7 Deadly Sins house. He went on to say that if she was applying, she should say her home and her identity. She replied, I'm from Paris, and my name is Renee. This is my guardian who will be joining me. The egg-headed man said that if they allow a half-demon to be a bodyguard, the criteria for the 7 houses of sin have been met, and that he couldn't believe that Sect would accept one of them. Renee interrupted him and said, enough is enough. I won't stand by and watch you humiliate the House of Paris any longer. The egghead replied that he doesn't discriminate against the identity of applicants and told her to forget what he said, and asked about Adele's house and identity. Adele lied and said, my name is Adele. But the man with the head of eggs said that the registration was over and they could come back in 2 days. Adele explained that in the war between humans and demons, the half-demons were stronger and fought with the humans, so naturally the others hated them. He was upset, but there was nothing he could do about it. He told Renee that they should find a place to sit, but she was still upset. We saw them standing in front of a building, and he said, this looks good enough. She replied, the buildings here are so old. He told her that there was nothing they could do because they had no money, and the 10 coins Creed gave them was enough to live on for a month. After the war, the Paris house was so poor they couldn't ask for more. He asked her to let them in, As soon as they entered, the official welcomed them. Adele. He asked if there was enough room for 2 people for 2 days. The official replied in the affirmative, but asked if they would be staying in the same room, which made Renee freeze in place in embarrassment as if her brain was steaming. Adele said he wanted 2 separate rooms. The man replied that the price would be 2 pieces of gold for 2 sinks for 2 days, and that the sinks would be on the 2nd floor. Adele said it's about 200 KRW, so it's not too much. Renee said she was going first, looking a little disappointed. He told her he would get the bags afterward and told her to relax. She was still a little hesitant, but told him to relax as well. He told himself that she had lived in a big mansion all her life, so this was probably her first time sleeping in a place like this, but she would soon get used to it. He said he needed to rest for the next 2 days. The scene shifts to the academy, and one of the soldiers is barking and telling all the applicants to enter and follow instructions. Adele said that there were too many people. He wondered if there were at least 100 people, and couldn't believe that there were so many applicants who wanted to defeat humans. He realized he had to be careful about his identity. One person said that from this point on, everyone should hold on to their ID cards and go in order. Adele wondered what they meant by "get out," and suddenly, the train arrived at the station. Adele said he never expected this. One of the officials said that there was a labyrinth-like dimensional gate installed to prevent intruders, and no one could reach the site except by this train. Adele thought the huge fortress they saw was just a part of the place, not the academy itself. He wondered how big the place was. As they sat there, a voice announced that they would be arriving at the site soon, and they should prepare for impact. Adele looked surprised, and when he finally opened his eyes, he saw the academy. The train stops and starts to descend, telling them to go to the big hall for the exam. As they were walking, Adele and Renee saw many people getting off the train. Adele said, "This place is so big that it's a bit overwhelming. Most of the people here are young demons," but he wondered if there were other heirs of the 7 deadly sins. He spotted several people wearing distinctive uniforms and said they weren't students, they looked like teachers. He thought that if he could make a good impression on them, life here would be easier. Renee said it was getting late, and as the doors closed, the lights went out. "It's been daylight for a while," he said, wondering if it was a magical effect or not, and not knowing what they were going to be tested on. Then we heard a woman's voice telling everyone to shut up. When the light shone on her, everyone raised their eyes to her and she gave them a sharp look. She welcomed them all to sight, calling them idiots with no brains, and said she couldn't believe there were so many people eager to die this year. Adele can't believe the amount of stress in her voice alone. Then she started laughing and said that that was enough small talk, and they would start the audition immediately. When she started releasing her aura, Adele was worried about Renee, but she told him he needed to concentrate on the exam. The people around them began to choke and fall to their knees, and the teachers were watching the students. One of the teachers told a colleague that the headmistress had strange tastes and asked him what he thought. He replied to him, "It doesn't matter how talented you are. If your mental strength is weak, you have nothing." There is a reason why the director personally supervises the first stage of the admission test, called the mental endurance test, just to see if the applicants can withstand interrogation and keep secrets if they are caught. Afterward, the man said that 5 minutes had passed and most of them had signed, and that this should be enough by now. Except for 2 people, the rest all signed. She had high expectations because of the large number of applicants. The man said that about 40% lasted more than 5 minutes compared to the last round, which is a large number. She said that was a relief, and added that this batch had all the heirs of the 7 deadly sins, and that the rumors could be true because so many applicants had survived. He said it made sense, but asked her to wait, and was surprised. "Who is this boy? He doesn't look like one of the heirs." She said, "That's true, but he's been sober all along like the others, but at this rate, he won't last long. You can see him on his knees." The man realized that something wasn't normal. Adele began to emit an evil red aura that surprised the teachers and attracted the attention of Principal Lucien. They realized the situation was serious, and Adele began to release his energy into the crowd. One of the teachers grabbed his sword and said they had to finish him off right here, right now. At first he didn't look anything special, but suddenly the atmosphere around him changed and he developed a cold, emotionless killing intent, as if he were plucking a flower or killing a bug. Not the primitive killing intent of monsters, but the killing intent of the worst killers. This caused all the teachers to shout at him, and his reaction was faster than they realized. Lucien's voice made him look surprised because he felt nervous, which is wrong. He shouldn't feel that way in front of a test taker. The next teacher smiled, People were still falling on the floor and Adele was standing up. Adele said he was about to lose his mind and that he had to find a way to cope with the situation. This was just before what happened. He said that if he used his killing intent, it would be enough to counter the aura, and he had no other choice, so he started screaming as he fired the intent. Lucien said that they were holding up well and that her aura would only get stronger. Adele started laughing and said he could take it. Their auras started bouncing off each other, but it was actually her aura that was dissipating around him. She was surprised, and Adele was sobbing and trying to catch his breath. Then he said that it really worked and that he felt much better now. Rennie wondered what she was doing and looked at her and saw that she was shaking but still standing. He said she was holding up as well as could be expected. He added that the heirs of the 7 deadly sins were also holding up well. Then they were introduced to us. The heir of envy is Bolton, the heir of lust is Ran, the heir of gluttony is Samuel, the heir of sloth is Aaron, and the heir of greed is Jawahar. Adele says that some of the characters are written with true love, but they are all destined to die at the hands of the main cast. 6 of them, including Rennie, will be killed. He then notices something that catches his eye and says, long white hair, red eyes, crown of thorns. Without a doubt, she is the worst villain in the future of the demon world. She is the demon lady and heir to the wrath, Diana. Suddenly, the aura stops, and the first test is over. Adele explains that the Demon King usually comes from the Wrath family, and there's no logical reason for her to be here. The Demon King's successor doesn't need to come to sight as an applicant to take the test, and he wonders if something happened that he doesn't know about. What kind of test is this? They must know who our parents are. One of them shouts. One of them screams and demands to see the principal, but he grabs him by the head like a basketball and says, it doesn't matter who your father is, okay. Then he throws him to the ground and says, I'm not going to repeat myself again. Anyone who can't last 5 minutes in the first test has no business here. He then announces that those who failed have been disqualified, and the guards are ordered to close the gates. Adele says that sight is really tough, but luckily, he passed the test. When he thinks about it, the girl is actually the headmistress of the academy, and he thinks he's seen her before. She's one of the most powerful characters in the demon world despite her cute looks. Next, she introduces herself as Lucien. Adele says that he was lucky to pass the first test, but he needs to be more careful because he could fall at any moment, especially since there will be fewer people passing the next test. He hears people talking about Renee and notices that she looks very famous, and says that it makes sense since they are all heirs of the 7 sins and can tolerate murderous intent, but no one has noticed him, even though he can tolerate it as well as them. Still, Renee congratulates him and says he did a good job. He replies that he was just lucky, but he thinks he should at least be satisfied that he gave the impression that he's not just an ordinary applicant, and he's sure the teachers and the principal will recognize him. Then a teacher bellows to get everyone's attention, and the trainer, whose name is Aries, comes forward with a tattoo on his neck. Adele comments that he looks like the kind of guy who always has a switchblade in his pocket. Aries congratulates them on their success in the first test, and says that they have demonstrated great mental strength because the test was a simulation of a situation in which they would be tortured by humans in the future. He adds that the 8 applicants who survived the first test will receive extra points, and if they do well in the second test, they will be allowed to enter the weapons department. Adele says this is very lucky, and he feels grateful that he was able to endure and feel jealous of everyone else. Aries announces that he will now explain the next test, in which they will demonstrate their abilities, especially the skills and weapons they can use against humans. The class they are assigned to may depend on the results of this test, so they need to be careful about that. Adele says he must mean that they will be assigned to the right class at depending on the weapons and skills they use, and asks himself what kind of humans they will face. Aries says he's going to show them who their opponent will be in the next test. Then, he raises his fingers and snaps them, and a blue aura begins to form in his hands. A man dressed as a tiger with a gun starts to appear amidst the violent aura, and we see a man dressed as a tiger with a gun. Adele immediately recognizes him, and says, this is the most powerful hero among the heads of the 6 great families, and his name is Nina Seal. Seal begins to emit a blue aura, and Adele wonders what brings this man here. It's so unexpected. Renee asks him if he knows who this is, and of course he does. This is the head of the house of Nina and someone closely related to the hero of the original story. Not only that, he's a known relative from birth. He's the father of the protagonist, the sword saint who made the most powerful house with his talent alone. The others recognize him and say he's the patron saint of the sword, and they seem to be trying to cut them off from the beginning. Adele says that it makes sense, they're really trying to do that. especially since he's already defeated so many demon houses before. Ares tells them that of course, he doesn't expect them to withstand the full power of the Sword Saint, and that's why he's only going to use 10% of his power, because if he uses his full power, they won't have a chance to survive. Renee says that 10% is easy, but Adele says that's not true. Even if he's weak, a monster is still a monster, and 10% of his power can easily destroy an entire city. He asks himself, how can they make an exam so tough? There must be a certain standard for passing. He wishes he could use a scroll. He wishes he could use a scroll of information, but he doesn't have enough money and the number of questions he can ask is limited. Eris says that at their current levels, they can't face it alone, so they will divide into teams to ensure fairness. The top 8 will be assigned to separate places, and the rest will be randomly assigned. Adele says he can't count on anyone to pick him up this time, but the students start to stare at Renee and want her to do it, and other people stare at Adele, and he says he's used to it, and they think he's just a lucky one. Renee then taps him on the shoulder and tells him to succeed and bring back Salem, and he responds by wishing her luck as well. Aris starts calling out the groups, and we learn that Adele is in group 33, and his team members are Kenna, Chris, and Sans. Adele says he doesn't know who they are, and that they could be minor characters who don't have much of a role in the original story. We see them standing in front of Adele, and he recognizes them himself. Chris recognizes himself and cries, and Sanchez looks angry and asks why half a demon is the team leader and says it's an insult to his family. Adele says he can't believe it. Even the minor characters are starting to look down on him, and there's no way this person thinks his home is that important. He then tells them all to do their best, and Chris and Kenna agree with him. He says they should assign roles, and he wants to know what weapons and abilities they use, starting with Chris. Chris says his ability is mana transformation, and he can summon a triangular prism and turn it into a shield or sword. He doesn't have a lot of killing power, but he's very versatile. Adele says that he's not a monster at all and that he'll pass the test. He then tells Kenna that it's her turn now. Kenna says she's more of a support type than a combat type. Adele asks her if she means support abilities, and she replies, giving an example of her praying to the demon lord to increase her allies' speed. When she starts to say the spell, Adele starts to feel the boost. She asks him what's up, and if it feels lighter, even though the effect was almost noticeable. He says, I think so. She calls him cruel and is disappointed, and he laughs and says he was just joking and tells her not to get upset. He then says that her ability is better than nothing, but that she is weak and doesn't know how she passed the first test. He then asks Sanchez about his own abilities, and Sanchez replies that he's the best he can do. He starts forming rocks around his body, and Adele comments that this stiffening ability is perfect for his role as a blocker. Sanchez then asks Adele to show him his abilities. Adele uses the switch skill and switches places to be right in front of Sanchez's face, surprising him. Adele explains that this is a teleportation ability. Sanchez starts to sweat, realizing that he could have been killed at that moment. Kenna and Chris say that the ability looks amazing, and Adele thanks them for the compliment. He adds that he doesn't know what variables might arise, so he doesn't want to reveal his true abilities just yet. He then explains that the distribution of places should be simple. Chris and Sanchez, who are good at defense, will be up front. He will be in the center, and Kenna will support them from behind. He asks them if it's okay, and Kenna says, and Sanchez nods in agreement from behind. Harris announces that it's time for the next test, and each group needs to prepare. Adele says it's finally starting. The first group advances, and even though they're facing the Sword Saint, their eyes are full of excitement. His sword moves like it's in slow motion, but all of a sudden it can take out all 4 members in an instant, surprising everyone. Some of them start screaming, and Adele says that he can't even see his movement, asking himself if it's even 10% of his strength. Then Ares calls out to the second group, and they are crushed as well. Then the third, and Kenna and Chris look worried. After the fourth, a few members of the fourth group don't want to enter the fight, saying there's no point, and they don't want to lose points. Ares coldly tells them that they can skip the test, and asks if the other 2 members will continue. They say they will try, which surprises Adele that they are determined to try. He says that what he's thinking could be right, but as usual, he doesn't explain what island. Chris asks if they really don't have to take the test, and Adele replies, of course not. The 2 virtuous members of the 4th group are now standing in front of CL. Adele says it's impossible to deal with him and 2 people, and he wants to observe for longer, but they are immediately eliminated by remote Halo attacks. Adele comments that if this was a real Halo sword, would be split in half. Chris asks if they can actually defeat such a monster. Sanchez replies that there's no reason to be afraid of a mere human, even though he's shaking with fear. Adele laughs at this. The 5th group is eliminated, and events accelerate from the 6th to the 9th group. The 10th group quits, and then they continue to the 30th group. Adele says that by the time they reach the 30th group, 5 groups have withdrawn, and none of them have managed to deal a single, effective blow to the Sword Saint. This is a battle against an unbeatable opponent, and there are no restrictions on withdrawal in the text. It's not all bad, though, as we see them fending off the attack, and Chris looks amazed. Adele says that the more they advance, the longer the battles get, and the better their skills get compared to the previous applicants. And he now understands what the real requirement is in order to prepare for the next test. Sanchez says it's their turn, and Chris Bird says he's scared. Adele tells them that he has figured out how to succeed. Sanchez asks him what he means. Adele says the criteria is that even if they lose to an overwhelming force, they have to get up and fight until the end. Based on the way the trainers deal with quitters and the strength of the Sword Saint, he is sure of this. Sanchez is about to say something, but Adele interrupts him, and Ares interrupts them as he calls out, Group 33. Adele says that they have to defeat the Sword Saint because with their strength, they can do this. Sanchez asks him if he's serious, but Chris and Kenna react to the idea and say it doesn't matter if they lose. Adele says it doesn't matter if he's half demon or not. With his talent, he can defeat the most powerful villain. The team is lined up in battle formation, and Adele says it's time to start. Unlike the main character, Adele doesn't know much about CL because he didn't specify many things while creating him, and he asks himself what to do now. He tells them not to get nervous and to fight from where they are. Chris says okay, but Sanchez replies that he's known this all along. The Sword Saint's aura begins to move around his body, and Adele shouts, "No, he's coming." CL swings his sword upward, breaking Chris's entire barrier and throwing him into the air. Sanchez manages to hold on, and Adele orders Kenna to protect Chris, to which she replies that she's doing it because she needs to minimize the impact of his fall. Adele then tells Sanchez that it's his turn, and Sanchez screams, "I know." The next blow comes, and Sanchez takes it all the way with his body, but manages to block it. After he withstands the attack, Adele says that this is good, and that he noticed a gap before the second strike. But it's so obvious that his instincts tell him it's a trap, and he wonders if Seal has artificial intelligence or something like that. Adele tells them that the second strike is coming right now and they need to get back to their places. Chris gets back up, and we see that his barrier is cracked, which means he's about to collapse, and Sanchez's arm is also cracking, all in one fell swoop. Adele tells Sanchez to hold on a little longer. As Seal launches his next attack, Adele says, "It's the same pattern." Chris throws Laura again, and Sanchez tries to block the blow with his armor, but his deflection disappears as the attack gets stronger. Sanchez asks him what he's going to do, and he says they're all going to die if it goes on like this. Adele replies that they just have to hold on a little longer. Sanchez calls him crazy, but Adele says they were the only team to block the second strike, and wonders if Seal will use the same pattern again. Seal raises his sword towards them, then points it along the ground and strikes with both hands in a terrifying double-handed strike. The air around them begins to change, and Adele realizes something. Chris is on the ground and Kenna is treating him. Adele walks over to him and asks him if he's okay. He says he knows it's hard, but he needs to trust him again. Chris is in pain and asks Sanchez what Adele is doing. While Seal is about to attack again, Chris asks if Adele has a plan, to which Adele replies, "Sure, I'll shove my sword down his throat for sure," and then smiles a truly evil smile. Kenna and Chris look at him worriedly. Just then, Salon begins to prepare for his next attack, and the aura around him grows. Sanchez yells out a warning that the attack is coming and tells Chris to move back. Adele says he'll have to hold out this time without a barrier. Sanchez asks him what he means. Just as the third attacker swoops in, before Sanchez can catch up, he suddenly loses his transformation and flies into the sky. Adele ties himself to him with his ability to switch places, so they switch places, and he is now just above Ciel. Adele then ties himself to his sword and switches places again, causing the sword in the sky to return to Laura. Adele returns with his dagger, and now that Ciel is unarmed, he says this is his chance to kill him. As the attack is about to take place, Iris and Rennie are stunned, but Ciel actually kicked Adele in the chest a few moments ago, but wouldn't have stabbed him in the throat. Adele starts spitting blood and says he has to hold on. Then he activates his feature, and the darkness begins to wrap around them, creating a small cocoon. He says that if it wasn't for Chris's barrier, his guts would have exploded. The repositioning failed, but at least he was able to trap Ciel in a space of pure darkness with no trace of light. Even he, Doob, could see it. But he has the Dark Fang, and in that space, it's more powerful than any weapon and will defeat him with everything it has. Ciel shakes his head a bit, then starts walking towards Adele and makes his way through the darkness. And Adele is so impressed that he says, "This guy is a real monster." We see Adele throwing his hands up in the air and smiling, because that was part of his plan. The Dark Fang starts spinning in the air behind Ciel, but it's not the only attack, there are many others. Adele says, this time you fell into my trap. Addressing the Sword Saint, he says, the time of the end has come. Many fangs of darkness begin to emerge from small cracks, and Adele clenches his fists and activates the rain of black blades, which stabs the Sword Saint from all sides. The cocoon begins to slowly disappear. Chris and the others ask what's going on, and Ares says it's almost over. As the darkness disappears, Adele steps forward from the darkness to reveal Seal's body lying on the ground. Everyone is stunned, and the room falls silent. Adele smiles and says, silence means I've done something good. Bolton comments that it was fun. Chris and Kenna then run up to Adele and say that what he did was amazing, and ask him how he did it. Adele replies, it was a collaboration between everyone, and asks about Sanchez. Kenna says he was traumatized, but the teachers are helping him recover. Adele says, that's reassuring. He then adds, it's time for us to finish this. They ask him what he means, and he says, it's all over. By the time Adele stabs Seal's body, his legs start to shake. Chris asks, what are you doing? He says, we need to make sure he's really dead. Ares watches with interest. Then Ran laughs and says, for Hajin, it's him. And one of her fans comments, for you, it's nothing special. Ran laughs and replies, of course, he was born with less, and his true nature will come out, no matter how hard he tries. She then notices Renee giving her an angry look. Ran asks herself, what's wrong with her? She notices her horns and associates them with the Paris family, but still doesn't understand the reason for the look, and says, it's starting to frankly scare her. Some people misunderstand and say that this is to be expected from the heirs of the Seven Sins, and that they are indeed in a battle of psychological intimidation. Her first fan interjects and says, it's clear that the victory will go to Ran. The other girl isn't even fit to be a snack. At this moment, Adele sees Renee from afar and wonders why she's radiating so much violence and aggression. Iris approaches Adele, and when Adele turns to him and asks him what he wants, Iris asks him if he is saying all this because he doesn't really know the truth. Adele says he has no idea. Iris turns to him and says that he will be watching him from now on. Adele comments that he thought he was getting a compliment or something like that, but instead, he experienced the most embarrassing moment of his life, adding that Ares could simply be autistic. As Ran and Renee face each other, Adele comments that he can't believe they're still going through with this, and he's now on Renee's side. He asks about the girl standing next to her, and starts to say that based on her hair and the horns on her exposed forehead, she's from the House of Lust, and her name is Laurel Ran, but he wonders why she's trying to fight with Renee here. He's been so preoccupied with the story of the human world that he's completely oblivious to the events of the demon world. Laurel notices him in the crowd and starts to look at him, then screams and calls him a hybrid. Adele is surprised and asks why she is calling him that. She says he should be her slave. Renee suddenly rushes over and pulls out her sword and is about to attack Laurel. Adele calls her by her name. Laurel looks stunned and begins to draw her weapon, wondering if she's gone crazy. Ares yells and orders everyone to stand up, emphasizing that unnecessary fights are not allowed in sight, and that they should take their personal issues out of here. Adele is relieved that Ares resolved the situation, and says it's good that nothing ugly happened between them before the entrance ceremony. Renee walks away annoyed, but Laurel comments that she might not be in her right mind. Adele asks her if she's okay and reminds her that it's her group's turn, so she needs to prepare herself. Renee walks over to him and starts wiping the sweat off his forehead and says he did a good job. Laurel begins to question the nature of their relationship and wonders if Renee is really dating a half-demon. Adele replies that he's doing better now that he passed the test and thanks her. Renee says that she thinks he hid his power to pretend to be weak, and asks him if she's wrong. But before he can continue his evasive talk, the 34th group is called, and she says she has to walk, but she's not going to tell anyone. Adele says he used all his strength to get infected and asks if he looks so weak. It turns out she's still a Valkyrie priest of the family. Laurel screams again and asks Adele to say his name. He asks her if she speaks to him, and she says yes. He tells her his name. She says it's not a bad name, and he asks her what she wants from him. She starts releasing her aura and says they've crossed paths before, asks him to leave the Parisian and serve her instead, and says he'll testify to how crazy hot she is, and that she's going to steal and crush his stupid skirts. Adele says he's fine, but he needs to watch Renee and then they can talk. She starts to get confused and asks herself why it's not working. He's completely preoccupied, asking himself if he can see the full power of Renee, completely ignoring Laurel. He wonders if she's strong enough to have high expectations for the other 7 sons of Sin. As she and Ciel stand in direct confrontation and release their auras, Adele comments that she is much stronger than he imagined. Renee begins to advance on her own, drawing Diana's attention. Bolton says she's fun too. Adele can't believe she's walking along the side of the Sword Saint, and wonders what she's thinking, standing right in front of him. They start to look at each other. Their aura is still rising, then it starts to fade for a moment, and Renee starts to clench her teeth. The atmosphere is very charged between them. and before the Sword Saint can even get a chance to attack, Rene cuts his body in half with just one blow. Adele looks stunned as she backs away, leaving half of him standing. The crowd is screaming like crazy, and Ares says, "It's not worth it." Adele says, "No." Rand says it's unfortunate that she didn't get to see herself being humiliated by the Sword Saint, but Rene, should be able to at least have that level of strength if she's going to face her. Adele asked, "Does that mean that all the children of the 7 deadly sins can defeat the true Sword Saint?" Rand replied, "No one can do that right now, and if the last Demon King was still alive, it might have been different." But Adele said, "If the boys are only 10% stronger than the Sword Saint, then when they grow up, they will be much stronger than him." Rana asked him if he was throwing stones at her and said that anyone with eyes could see that this is not even a tenth of the real power of the Sword Saint. Adele replied that if this is true, it means that he had a hard time against a counterfeit that is not even a tenth of the real one, and said that he could be the author of this world, but he doesn't know anything about the world of demons. But the anticipation makes his heart beat fast, and he can't wait to see what will happen. Only the children of the 7 deadly sins remained, and due to the effect of Rene's test, the rest of the children defeated the Sword Saint very easily. The battles were so one-sided that it was hard to distinguish the power levels between the heirs, but he knew who was the strongest of them all, so there was no need to worry. Ares roared and said that the entrance exams were over and asked everyone to gather in front of the stage for the announcement of the results of the next exam. He said that everyone who participated in the fight passed, whether they won or lost. Adele commented, "Exactly what I expected." Ares told everyone who passed the test that they did a great job and are now officially members of Sect and official trainees, but they shouldn't be too happy, because the road ahead will be so hellish and difficult that they will wish they could give up. Ares went on to say that everyone who passed must attend the acceptance ceremony in 2 days, but asked the 8, who defeated the Sword Saint, to stay put. Rene asked why, and Adele said they could be rewarded with access to the weapons room that she remembered from the first test. Ares said that they all passed the test with flying colors, and as promised, he would give them a chance to enter the weapons room. Bolton raised his hand and said he had a question, and Ares said go ahead. Bolton asked if they could come out with a lot of weapons because they must be very useful. Adele commented, as expected of Lycan Bolton, son of envy, his curiosity knows no bounds. He made a brief appearance in my novel. Ares replied, "No, it's hard to concentrate if someone is carrying so many weapons. That's why only one weapon is allowed, and we're too busy to answer any more questions." He then asked them to follow him to the weapons room. Ares walked up to a wall and started pumping mana into it and said, "This is the advantage that Kate offers you, whether you choose the best or the worst, it's up to you." Adele glanced at the door to the weapons room and asked, "Why does look like a cell entrance?" Ares explained that they would enter one after the other, in reverse order for the next entrance exam, and just in case, everyone would be searched on the way out. Bolton laughed and said, "That means I'll be the first one in, and I'll choose the best one for sure." Ares snarled at him, "Shut up and get inside right now." Adele thought he would have done the same thing, but worried that if everyone behaved like that, would it still be a good thing when it was his turn? Bolton came out with a tiara and said it was pretty cool. Adele commented, "As I expected, everyone comes out with artifacts. I'd go with armor instead of a weapon." Rene told him it was his turn. He noticed that she had chosen a bracelet. He asked her about its characteristics. She replied that he would know when he entered, because there are descriptions of everything in there. He asked her what she meant, and she said that most of it is already described, but there are some things that don't have a description. He said he understood, and wondered if that meant it had no value, but he didn't think so because they take good care of it, and he was sure there was something special about it. Ares said it was the last one, looked at Adele and said, "If you have something to say, speak now." Adele replied, "You look like you don't want me to say anything." Then he asked him, "What does it mean to have a piece without a description?" Ares replied that it means they still haven't figured out exactly what island. It means you don't know who it belongs to or what kind of abilities it has. Adele said. Ares confirmed his words, adding that if he is lucky, he can get a piece with supernatural powers. But if he is unlucky, he can get a cursed piece that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He then said that time was running out and he had to go in. Adele said he guessed it depended on whether it was a good idea to go in or not. When he went in, he noticed that the place was light and tidy, and he hoped he wouldn't be surprised by anything scary. Suddenly, he saw a bright light and said, "That must be the door." When he entered, he saw a bunch of glass displays and said, "This is paradise." Then he noticed a spear and said, "This spear is very unique." He decided to read the description. The Spear of the Twin Fangs, which was used to hunt trolls. The description says that the spirits of the trolls killed by this spear still reside in it, and when mana is injected into it, twin trolls appear. Adele said, the description makes it sound important, but its abilities aren't impressive, and since I already have my dagger, I don't need it. He then spotted something called the Starlight Crystal, a crystal ball filled with starlight that was used by a famous miner back in the day. By injecting a small amount of mana, he can borrow starlight to illuminate his surroundings. Adele said, it's a little awkward for me because I'm using the dark element, but I could use it as a lamp. Then he spotted an empty space and wondered, what was the piece that was here? It was called the Crown of the Great Conqueror, and it had exceptional healing and endurance that lasted until the wearer died. That's the one Bolton was wearing. He said, that son of a bitch is really greedy. He added that Bolton had bought the pieces associated with his novel and didn't think he would find one of them here. He concluded that this probably meant that most of the good artifacts had been taken. The Snake's band is gone, the Demon General's banner is gone, and so on. There is nothing good left, he said, and the 7 deadly sins have taken all the good stuff. He wondered what he was doing, because most of the armor and weapons are either boring or monstrous. He glanced at Safe and said, I don't have a choice, but if it's a cursed artifact, it's a disaster. Suddenly realizing that he had something useful, he pulled out the scroll and said, although I need to scratch my armor, a little more money would be acceptable. Arson asked, tell me about the broken sword that has no description in the weapons room. Arson said he would have to pay for this information at the usual rate. Adele said to wait for a while, then began to understand what was going on. He asked about the damaged scroll next to him, and he asked for a lower price. He concluded that as long as the scroll said the price, all he had to do was pick the item that commanded the highest price. There were 7 boxes with no description, so he decided to ask for them in order. One of them was shaped like an eagle and contained 1 gold coin. Adele laughed at this, because the scroll said that the owner's wealth would be exchanged for someone else's bad luck. The next one wished for 100 gold coins, and the next for 50. Adele sighed and said, there's nothing good about them. There are only 2 left. One wished for 300 pieces of teddy bears, and he said, that's a fairy tale piece. It's probably the best, I should take it. Suddenly, he felt a strange need to poke him. There was a strange sensation coming from a necklace on his side, and he said it felt like someone was watching him. Then, he thought there was another piece that he hadn't realized was there. He wondered if these were Adele's original senses. He asked about the nameless necklace, and the scroll began to glow. Adele wondered why she was behaving like this, and the paper said that he should make an offering to a ruler, because the item radiates a powerful aura. Adele asked, so this is a legendary item, and began to sweat. He said he thought his end was coming, but unexpectedly, his luck struck him in an unbelievable way. The scroll began to fall, and Adele said he was too early for joy, and wondered what kind of ruler he would have to present now, when he already doesn't even have a simple ruler, let alone a demon ruler, let alone a demon ruler. He wondered what exactly the necklace was. He decided to try to pump some mana into it, but there was no response at all. It's frustrating, he said, if only I knew what it could do. All she does is ask me to give a ruler and that's it. I could try some tricks. He asked, which ruler has anything to do with the necklace in the basement? And all they said was present a ruler. Even if I change the wording of the question, I will probably get the same answer, he said. Hesitant to give up, he unzipped the box and said he was sure the necklace was much more expensive than any ordinary artifact, and his instincts told him so. To make sure, he opened his status screen and found it full of question marks. Exactly what I expected, he said, adding, no one else is going to care about it anyway, and I might as well take my time to find out what it island. When he came out, Eris asked him about his necklace, and Adele replied that it was one of the items that had no description. Eris said he found it hard to believe that he chose an item without knowing its function or what it was, and assured him that he must know something about it, but Adele said he didn't know anything at all. Eris gave him a skeptical look. Adele wondered why he hated that look, but Eris surprised him with what he said. I believe you, he continued. As a site instructor, I have to trust my students. Now you should be very careful with the artifacts you choose, because in times of trouble, they can save your life. Adele thought that everyone here but him could be the leader of the demon world someday, and they would get a lot of support and investment in the future, and he wished he could get some of that support too. He wondered if he would be able to pull it off. Eris announced the end of the meeting and said they would meet again at the Academy's opening ceremony. Adele told Renee that they should move back in, and she agreed. On the way out, Bolton called out to him and laughed and said, were you rude when we first met? He then introduced himself and said his fighting style was amazing. Adele replied, it was an honor to meet you, and he introduced himself as well. Adele thought that the interview came out of nowhere, but it's fine as long as Bolton started it. Suddenly, Adele was surprised by something, because Bolton was squeezing his hand too hard. He thought, I don't understand understand what this guy is doing. Suddenly, he thought, Bolton is the kind of person who doesn't care about the weak, and only shows interest if he's motivated by jealousy and greed. He said that one day he pushed the hero and the human world to the brink, but when he realized his strength, he decided to postpone the fight for another day, and said they would fight again. In short, he's obsessed with battles. Bolton says, "You look like you're suffering. What's wrong with you?" Adele Bird, "Nothing," he says, asking why he's there when there are more powerful people nearby. Adele ties himself to Bolton's sword and switches places with him, much to Bolton's surprise. Adele says he wants to stop for now, because after the test is over, everyone is tired, and he can't even reach his dagger because of the pain in his hand. Bolton starts laughing like crazy and says that he didn't expect this, and that Adele is so strong that he wants to fight him here and now to the death. Adele responds with no and emphasizes that, as he said before, he doesn't intend to fight. Renee screams and says, "Stop it," and says that if he wants to fight her guard, he'll fight her too. Bolton looks at her and says that as much as he likes to fight, fighting the two of you would be too much for him and he doesn't want to get tired before the study begins. He adds that he's sure there will be plenty of opportunities for them to meet next time. Adele looks surprised and says, how can he say he doesn't want to fight when he wanted to fight to the death? The man is absolutely crazy. He adds that after seeing him with his own eyes, he doesn't feel like he can understand him. Meanwhile, Bolton is still trying to understand how Adele pulled his sword out of his hand. Renee tells Adele that they should leave, and he agrees, saying that today was the first day, but it feels like old times, and that he's starting to look forward to life here at the academy. Back at the academy, Adele opens the window feeling very comfortable, and says that maybe it's because of the difficulties he had yesterday, but today he feels completely fine. His body is better, and he feels stronger. He says he's going to try on his uniform. The place where he is staying shows great appreciation for those who wear the uniform. After he puts it on, he says it's more comfortable than he expected, and he's told he won't be allowed to wear anything other than the uniform for 3 years, but he thinks it's at least functional. Adele hands Renee her uniform as well, wondering how she'll look in it, and wondering if he should go see her. He knocks on her door, she asks him who, and he says he just wanted to ask her if she needed anything before going out. She asks him to come in, and when he comes in, her face is flushed, and the sun is behind her. Adele stands in awe, and then tells her she's beautiful. Renee is shocked and asks him if he's going anywhere. He comments that even her cheeks are red and says she has a very sweet side. Since it's a day off, he thought he'd take a walk around the city and advise her to get a good rest because he's going to walk today. But she asks him to wait and says that he has something he needs to do. He asks her what she means and what he has to do. She looks at him with the eclipse on her face and says, "Hey, guard." That's when he thinks, oh right, I forgot I'm her guardian. I completely forgot about it because I was so excited about the idea of resting. She tells him that she is going to go with him, that she might need to change her clothes, and asks him to wait. She asks him if he's going to keep looking for her, and he says he's going to go out and get her. As he leaves, his eyes start to water because it's his day off and he can't rest. He realizes that the city is so vibrant and clean, it's hard to believe that there was a war here only 10 years ago. While reconstruction is still going on in the outer areas, the capital looks like this. The humans may have won the war, but they failed to take full control of the capital. Rennie comes up to him, grabs his shoulder, and says she wants to eat something. He asks her if she means street food, and she says, uh-huh. We see them in front of Bishoy's vendor and the food looks very appetizing. Adele asks him, what kind of skewers are these? The man replies, it's marinated antelope meat skewers with vegetables. Adele wonders if they are similar to chicken skewers and orders two. Renee eats one. Adele says he likes the taste and asks her if she likes it or not. She says, terrible. He wonders how a girl like her can make such a face, and wonders if she's starting to open up to him. Afterward, as they continue their tour of the city, Adele says that he hasn't had any real rest in a long time, and this could be the last time he has any free time. He stands in front of a statue of a woman and says he doesn't know who she island. He decides to ask Renee, who is she? She replies that she doesn't know because she is the first demon queen. He says that this explains a lot of things, and now that he thinks about it, she really does look like Diana. He comments that he won't have much of a chance to see the demon queen's face up close, so he wants to take a closer look. Suddenly, the statue's eyes begin to glow, and its necklace also glows, which confuses him and makes him wonder what's going on. A green beam comes out of the statue and goes straight to the necklace. Adele is still trying to figure out what's going on, but he notices that one of the jewels in the necklace has turned gray. Renee asks him why he's standing there, staring like that. He looks confused and wonders if he's imagining everything he's seen, but he's sure he saw the light coming from the statue and the color of the necklace has changed. He looks at her to see if she's fooling him, and then realizes that he's the only one who saw what happened. Until now, Adele has only found vague answers such as sacrifices to the ruler. But now he has discovered something very important in a place they never expected, and it's connected to the first demon queen. If he goes through everything that has to do with her, he'll uncover something very important. She says she thinks they should go back, but he is very curious to know the truth about the necklace. The next day at the academy, it was time for the enrollment ceremony. The principal and teachers were already sitting in the hall where the ceremony would take place, and about 100 new students had arrived. He says it was just like a normal enrollment ceremony, and some of the students looked stunned and couldn't believe that the principal was just a little girl. He thinks they were so overwhelmed by her presence that people started calling her cute. Here's Adele saying, "Cute? What cute? She's covered in tattoos and has the body of a child, yet they call her cute." Then he wonders if his eyes are betraying him, as he himself has called her cute before. The headmistress gives them a sharp look, and Adele looks surprised, then quickly says that he means she's likable and wonders if she can read mind. Aries tells them to be quiet, because the enrollment ceremony is about to begin. As the principal's rather mundane speech comes to an end, the atmosphere gradually begins to calm down. The headmistress says that they must abide by Sect's rules, and that's the end of her speech. Now it was time to swear in the valedictorian and salutatorian. The valedictorian was none other than Diana, and the runner-up was Bolton. Someone says, as expected, the two of them got the positions. As for Renee, she seemed completely unaffected, but the only reason she enrolled was to avenge her mother, so she probably doesn't care about the details. As for him, it doesn't matter what people say, he has to focus on what he's supposed to do. Then he gets a suspicious feeling from his spider sense. Someone is consulting him, and it's Bolton. He wonders what this person's story is, but decides to ignore him and not respond. Then they ask the top student, Diana, to step forward. Everyone can't help but stare at her. Adele says, as you would expect from someone blessed by the judges, no one can stand in her way. Bolton and Diana begin to take their oaths, vowing to erase the shame and rebuild the demon kingdom. As they recite their oaths, the atmosphere in the hall changes. Anger began to rise at the people who had lost their homes and families at the hands of humans. If someone finds out, they are descended from arson. The thought of it is terrifying. At worst, they would be tortured forever. The enrollment ceremony is now over, and Ars tells everyone to look at the bulletin board behind them to see which classes they are assigned to, and once they are sure, to go to their assigned classrooms. Adele tells Renee, let's go. As everyone looks at the boards, he realizes that he has been assigned to Class A, and Renee wonders where he island. Then he bursts with joy and starts yelping and saying, what a pity. And then he tells her she's in Class C. He didn't want them to separate. She responds to him, wipe that stupid expression off your face. Don't forget that you're still my guardian, so come if I need you. He says, sure, but in reality, he's saying to himself, I'll never leave her. Then he tells himself that he's finally getting some rest. In the meantime, he taps one shoulder, and someone gives him a very hostile look. The second asks him, do you want to die? Adele realizes that he is the embodiment of gluttony and none other than Samuel. If you think about it, he is one of the most powerful members of the 7 deadly sins. He wonders why he wants to pick a fight, even after such a minor foul. He tells himself that this day is going to be full of strange things that he must avoid at all costs. He apologizes and says he wasn't paying attention. Samuel replies, go away, adding that he's lucky it's the first day of school. Adele sighs and asks himself, why are all the children of the 7 deadly sins like this? And wonders if Bolton might as well be in Class A. The scene shifts to the school, and we hear a teacher asking them, but they refuse to believe her. Iris says that's not the case, and says she's a professional teacher too. Eris responds that this child is very dangerous, and says that in his experience, the best person to take care of him is the one who is in charge of him. She says that there are students already assigned to her who simply can't get past her in this way. Finally, we learn that her name is Edea, and Lucien tells her to sit down. Edea says that this is cruel and asks why this always happens to her. Lucien then asks Eris why he wants to switch classes. Ares replies that he plans to take care of Adele himself, because he has faced countless enemies similar to him on the battlefield, and that the boy is a natural-born killer who could turn his sword on his allies at any moment, so he must be restrained from now on. Some of the other teachers say that Ares is being overly cautious just because he is a half-demon and is much weaker than the children of the 7 sins. However, Ares replies that strength is not only measured by physical strength, but also by his ability to take action and his calmness, which is no less than that of the boys. The other teachers realize that he might be right. He adds that these are the reasons why he wants to supervise Class A because Eris needs to be careful of him. Edea yells at him and tells him to slow down and says that in the end, it simply means he doesn't trust her. Ares apologizes if he made her feel that way. Lucien sighs as they continue to argue, interrupting them and saying, that's enough. Suddenly, there is silence. She says she understands his concerns, but the seasons have already been set and changing them now would do more harm than good. Aries replies that he understands, but Lucien says that being careful is not harmful, and asks Edea to pay special attention to Adele, to which she replies that she understands. Lucien closes the meeting, and tells the teachers to go to their classrooms to receive their students. The scene shifts to Class A. Adele asks himself why his luck is so bad. Ran laughs in his face and says she is relieved that Diana is not here and Bolton is not here, but Samuel Island. Ran asks, how did she get here? He replies that the classes were randomly assigned. She laughs and says it's great and she's going to make him her slave. Samuel calls out to them and says, if you don't stop, I'll kill you. Ran gets angry and yells, who do you think you are to talk to us like that? Adele says he will do his best, with a tear rolling down his cheek. At that moment, the door slams open, and everyone spins around to see Edea coming in. She says they're being very disruptive and asks, are they really fighting on the first day of school? Adele recognizes her. She stands up and says, hello everyone. She introduces herself and asks them to think of her name. She says she's a lot older than they are, and people call her the Legion of Doom, and it's said that she killed 10,0 humans alone at the Pollux River, although some students believe the real number was 30,000. Adele says that if the strongest is now a teacher, it could improve his chances of survival. Edea says that now that the definition is over, she will explain to them how their lessons will go. She tells them that she's going to teach them how to hunt, but she doesn't mean hunting demons or animals. A student asks, what are we going to catch? She says they are hunting one of the reasons they are here, which is humans. Adele says this is the moment when things really start to get interesting. She says she'll teach them how to hunt, but magic and weapons will be taught by other instructors. Rand says her face is a little too sweet for a trainer. Edea adds that she will also be in charge of their basic physical endurance training. Adele says this is his weakness. She says she wants to start the first class, so they all have to gather in the training yard. We move there, and Adele says the area is huge, maybe 4 or 5 times the size of a normal arena, and asks if it's for weapons or magic. Edea asks if everyone has arrived, then tells them to focus and keep their eyes on something that's starting to form in front of them. The object grows larger and larger until a creature emerges, but it's not just one creature, it's several creatures that emerge from the rift. Adele expresses his amazement, and Edea says they are not real people. They are just illusions she created with her magic, adding that she herself created the Sword Saint in the entrance test. Adele says that she is a monster to be able to create such a thing, and that the Academy is truly amazing, but the Royal Academy is far superior to it, and it really makes one shudder. Edea says the mission is simple. They have to get past the humans and get to her. She asks who wants to go first, looks at Adele and asks if that's his name, then says he should try to stab her in the neck, just like he did with Saint of the Sword. We see her smiling, and she's a bit of a freak herself. Adele says, it's not just Aries, even Edea is starting to notice it, and asks, is he going to duel with her? She says that among the humans, there is a trainer who is the source of mental strength and their leader, and when the leader falls, everyone else falls like dominoes, and if the leader is strong, the others will be strong. She's going to be the leader of the humans. Adele replies that he understands, and it's almost like a law, defeat the enemy by defeating its leader. He adds that it would be very easy for someone like him to defeat the leader among all the human soldiers, but she replies with a smile, because, of course, she thinks it would be impossible. She says they will consider him successful if he can touch her body with his hands or his weapon, and then she says, go ahead. Human illusions begin to gather around her. Adele immediately uses his teleportation skill, moving right behind her and holding his dagger to her neck. To her surprise, he whispers in her ear and asks, is this a success or not? He says that when he was there were dozens of meters between them, but now that distance is no longer there, he has moved from one version to the next, adding that at first, he could only go a few meters, but this is a huge advance, and now he can easily destroy an enemy base. Edea starts laughing, and we see that there is a magical barrier that prevents his dagger from penetrating her. She says she now understands why he asked her to be careful of him, then touches his dagger and says he succeeded in his mission and can go back to his place. He says he understands, but he doesn't know whether her look is hostile or curious, and he doesn't know what makes her so excited. He thinks to himself, they still haven't figured out who I am. Then she says, now that you've seen what Adele has done, anyone who fails will have to take extra lessons. We hear the voices of the students attacking the illusions and shouting, die. Humans. Adele notes that they're doing the basics well, as expected of demons, but they've only managed to knock out a few of them. He says that if Edea had started controlling them immediately, it would have been over in an instant. We see a student being stabbed with a spear, and Adele says it could have really hurt someone. Another student says he's going to jump off, but the archers shoot their arrows into the sky and knock him down. Adele sits there, a little embarrassed, and says, "This teleportation technology is really powerful. At this rate, I can make it to the top of the class." Edea calls for the next candidate, and Samuel tells Adele to come forward. Adele says he wants to see if Samuel's overbearing personality is his true skill level. Samuel replies that he will start right away. Adele watches nervously as the ground around him begins to twist and turn, becoming more violent with each passing second, until a huge green tornado appears in front of him. Adele holds himself in place to protect Laura, while Samuel blows everyone away in the blink of an eye. He says that magic is crazy, that it's his unique ability, that it's a monstrous skill that eats everything, and that he's temporarily giving Adele the top spot in the class. Edea laughs and asks, "What's going on with this batch?" brushing the dirt away with her hand. Seeing that she's not impressed, Adele says, "As expected, no teacher can be defeated by an apprentice." Edea says that Samuel knocked out everything but her, and that it was so amazing that she was shocked for a moment, but unfortunately, he failed. Samuel is surprised. Edea snaps her fingers, and with that move, the whole army starts to form again. She says it's because he killed the commander, and that humans will always find someone to fill the gaps in their ranks, no matter how many are killed. Adele says he can't believe she summoned so many, there must have been less than 200. She replies that his magic was too powerful for a first-year apprentice. Samuel starts shaking with rage. Edea calls for the next intern, and Samuel returns in a huff. Adele comments that his face is full of resentment, but he took the result well. Samuel looks at him, sees his smile, but doesn't say anything, just frowns. Adele says that Samuel's overconfidence is the reason for his failure, and if he had focused on the goal, he would have succeeded without any trouble. Rand starts laughing and asks if they've listened long enough or not, because it's finally her turn. They wonder how she is going to do it. She starts ordering the humans around and says, "Do you really dare to get in my way?" And then she starts laughing with people behind her. She laughs, but they're not sure what exactly she's doing. Then we see her sweating nervously and wondering what to do first. Adele comments, "As expected of the Lust family, she doesn't fight herself. She controls her servants like a queen bee, and she can't do anything without them." She starts to sweat more, panicking, and saying she needs to do something. Suddenly, she realizes something, turns to Adele, and starts howling and begging him to help her, calling him, "my slave." Adele comments, "What did she say just now?" Everyone is asking themselves, what did he hear, and did she really call him her slave? He is asking himself, what is she thinking to say something like that? But she's screaming for him to hurry up and help her right now. Edea raises her finger silently, and the humans begin to approach her and start beating her. Adele asks himself, is it possible that she can't use magical reinforcements on herself? But he says it doesn't make sense, and there must be a special reason. Rand starts screaming for someone to help her. Adele sees healing magic being used, and one girl's knee is completely healed by a girl. Adele says that this is an ability that only humans have, which means she's half demon as well. He can't believe he's in the same class with a girl who has a rare talent for healing. He can't remember her name, but he realizes he has to find a way to communicate with her, and he wonders if he should approach her now or later. Edea says that Rand has been asking for Adele's help for a while, and now that the test is over, it would be nice to help her walk. Bird says he understands and will go to her right away, saying his timing couldn't be worse. Adele walks over to her, taps Rand's forehead with his finger and says, "It's no use." She replies that she's a little sore. He tells her to get up now that it's over, but she starts shaking and asks him, did he see everything? And then she starts howling. He asks her what she means and she tells him to stop being a slave and call her a slave. He tells her that he sees her as weaker than a slave. Edea then asks him if he's throwing stones at her, and asks everyone to clean up and gather around. She says that she had some expectations, but the results turned out as she expected, and that they did a good job in their first lesson. She adds that it's important for them to go through experiences like this so that they know where they are, where they can go wrong, and what their limits are, because knowing these things allows them to support each other so that they can work together perfectly in battles. Adele then explains that in the Imperial School for Humans, students are categorized according to their abilities, but here the classes are randomly distributed, so harmony is key. It's clear that Edea is trying to emphasize this point. Edea says that the only person who did the challenge was Adele, and that she is excited to see his progress, to which Adele replies that he will do his best to learn everything. She tells him to go back to class to prepare for the next class. He tells himself that this was a compliment, but all it did was make Samuel even more nervous, and Ran is always trying to make him her slave, so he doesn't know if he can make his own faction here. When they got back to class, after Edia's class was over, the next classes started, and they got to know the lecturer in charge of the theory class. In the theory class, they learned about the history of the demon world and the weakness of humans, and now they are studying the structure of bodies. Adele comments that this is proof that hitting a demon in its sensitive areas will hurt it. The lecturer tells them that next time there will be a test on what they learned today, so if they want to avoid the class, they have to memorize everything. Edel closes his book and rests his head on the desk, asking himself if this is for real, because it's just like his old school days. He sighs and says it's his first day, and he's starting to feel defeated. All the other students look like they're having fun, but Edel starts to yawn and say that he doesn't have any friends, just like old times. Then he spots the girl he saw earlier and says that this could be a good opportunity. He gets up and says he has to go talk to her. He approaches her, calls her and introduces himself, and everyone looks at him in astonishment at what he's doing. He just wants to understand why everyone is calling him. She says, "It's an honor to meet you," and he says that when two half-demons do anything, they have to get attention. She looks nervous, so he decides to put off talking to her for another time and tells her he'll talk to her again later, and she says goodbye. Sighing, he says he might go to the restroom to eat the little poison dragon, but as he opens the door, Samuel appears. Edel says, "Bad timing." Samuel asks him what he wants, and Edel replies that he was walking and that he'll get out of his way. Samuel calls him disgusting and refers to him as a vile creature. This time, Edel starts to get nervous and says that Samuel's family must be an amazing family to produce a walking and talking piece of garbage like him. They must be special. Samuel boils with rage, clenches his teeth, fires his halo, and says he will cut him to pieces. Adele comments that unlike Bolton, this guy shows pure hatred and hostility, and if he gets in his way, it's best to deal with him now. Just as they are about to get into an argument, the lecturer intervenes and asks them to stand up immediately and tells them that the class is about to start and everyone needs to go to their places. The two of them are surprised and ask themselves, when did he arrive? The theoretical education teacher was standing next to his desk as if he had appeared out of thin air. He smiled sweetly and told them to take their seats for the class to begin. Adele and Samuel prayed to the man, surprised by his sudden and quiet appearance. Samuel glared at him without saying a word as he returned to his seat. Adele is worried that the teacher's sudden appearance is unrecognizable, especially since it has disrupted his and Samuel's abilities. He can't help but wonder who this teacher really island. The teacher adjusted his glasses and asked the students to move back quickly to identify himself. Samuel made a grumbling sound and retreated back to his seat, leaving Edel worried about how easily the situation had been resolved. The teacher asked for silence, introduced himself as Ruppelt, and explained that he would be in charge of the magic class from now on. Edel understood. It made sense that there would be a magic class at Site Academy, and given the Academy's reputation, Ruppelt must be very skilled. The topic seemed promising for our hero. After all, magic is an essential element of any fantasy world. In his novel, magic was not categorized as a talent or ability, but more of a skill or even an academic science from Edel's point of view. Ruppelt began his lesson by explaining that understanding attributes is the basis for learning magic. He explained that the basic elements are earth, water, air, and fire, plus 2 other basic attributes, darkness and light, for a total of 6 basic attributes. Come to think of it, most people only have 1 trait, but he has 2. The Paris family was definitely associated with the darkness trait, but he wasn't sure about the Arsene family trait. Ruppelt announced that today's lesson would be to determine each apprentice's mana attribute. He then produced a purple-colored magic ball, explained that when you put your hand on it, it would change color and reveal your trait, and told them to stand in line. Adel decided to stay behind and watch the others first. One student hesitantly stepped forward, and when he touched the ball, it glowed red, indicating the fire attribute. The next student showed a green glow, indicating wind, and the next one revealed earth. The process moved quickly until it was Edel's turn. Ruppelt called him Apprentice Edel, which surprised our hero a bit, as the teacher seemed to know his name. Ruppelt urged him to put his hand on the ball quickly. Edel did just that and placed his palm on the ball. The ball responded, but instead of glowing one color, it glowed strangely. One half was black, and the other half was gray. "This is very rare," whispered Ruppelt, confirming that black is a dark trait common among high-level demons, but admitting that the gray color was new to him. Edel asked himself, doesn't even the teacher know what gray means? Ruppelt laughed lightly and said, "No, I do, but it's very rare." He then explained that gray symbolizes chaos, a magical trait that defies law and natural order. Edel was shocked and asked himself how there could be magic like that. Ruppelt apologized and explained that he didn't know much about this rare trait. Edel accepted this and said in his head that he had never even heard of the trait, let alone put it in his novel. The phrase, magic that defies the natural order, caught his attention. It could be the key to something, but he decided to temporarily focus on the darkness trait he knew. As he was back in his place, pondering the meaning of the gray mana, Ran suddenly appeared behind him, but our hero had already sensed her presence. Ran was surprised and asked him in a panic to find out how to detect her stealth technique. Edel asked her what technique she was talking about, but she ignored his question and thought for a moment before asking him what he was thinking when he provoked Samuel before her. Edel made a fool of himself and simply said he couldn't stand bullying. Ran pressed him and asked if he understood the consequences of playing with Samuel's family. He shrugged and explained that outside forces cannot interfere with the academy in any way. Ran sighed with annoyance at his apparent ignorance and told him she didn't mean it like that. She began to explain that it wasn't just a feud between the demons that belonged to Samuel's family, but stopped with another sigh and told him that she was going back right now and warned him to take care of it. Edel watched her walk away, wondering if she was warning him about the reputation of Samuel's family for brutal vengeance or not. Even though her tone didn't seem to suggest it, he pushed the thought aside to focus on the last class of the day. Suddenly, a heavy hand landed on the instructor's desk. It was Master Ares, who was going to be the fencing coach. He gave the class an angry look and labeled them as weak, and not worthy of being in the academy under normal circumstances. He scolded them for their poor performance and said that in the entrance exam, they all failed against a fighting dummy that used only 10% of its power. With the exception of the top 5 groups, everyone else failed miserably. Edel felt that the provocative words were deliberately meant to hurt their pride. Ares announced that he would teach them the art of fencing, and emphasized that even if they died, they should at least be able to take their opponent's arm with them. His first order was obvious: running. He shouted that physical strength is the foundation of fencing, that it greatly enhances fighting techniques, and can at least double or triple them. Quickly, the students began to sigh and complain that they were going to die after about 30 laps around the arena. Ares noticed that Ran and Samuel were using mana and angrily shouted, "Who told you to use mana when you're running?" and forced them to apologize and start from the beginning. Edel smiled as he saw the spoiled children of the rich trying to be clever, and thought about his own past in this world. From the moment he entered it, he's been facing hardships, first fighting knights in the human world, then escaping to the demon world and making a big mess, and even being threatened with death if they find out his identity. Finally, Ares stopped them and allowed those who had completed 50 laps to go back to their dorms, while imposing extra quotas on those who couldn't finish in time. Edel was tired and admitted to himself that the day had not been easy, so he decided to return to the dormitory. As he approached the huge dormitory building, he felt completely exhausted and just wanted to rest. As he wondered where the kids were going, someone put a hand on his shoulder and he panicked. He turned around and saw Rennie standing behind him with a serious look on her face. He wondered what she was doing here. He politely asked her if she was going to the dormitory, to which she replied, "Uh-huh." He asked her about her first day in class, but her silence and stern look made him wonder if a student had teased her. Finally, she simply said, "That's not enough." He was puzzled, so he asked for her explanation. She explained that the training was not enough and asked him to help her with calming exercises after class. The look on her face left no room for refusal. He sighed at her endless energy, but agreed. She told him there was a personal training arena nearby, and suggested they go quickly as time was limited. Despite his reluctance, he knew that training alongside the heir to one of the 7 deadly sins would be beneficial no matter how difficult it was. They quickly arrived at the training building. Adele noticed the large space filled with various exercise equipment, and the students who were focused on their training in earnest. The state-of-the-art equipment and the atmosphere made it clear that this place was designed to maximize physical strength. Renee showed Edel a barbell with a lot of weight on it, and suggested he start with it. Edel asked to be the first one to try it, and ignoring her comment about his low weight, he confidently said he had years of practice under his belt. He grabbed the bar and tried to lift it with all his might, but it didn't move or bend. Renee was watching him and told him that he was too weak and needed to stop before he hurt himself. Edel agreed, because his body, which was used to a quiet life at home, was not ready for this kind of effort. Adele went back to Laura, and Renee lifted the weight over her head with ease, leaving our hero impressed by her superhuman strength. He admits to himself the huge difference in strength between them and decides to work harder. After 2 hours of rigorous training, Edel suggested they end the class, and Renee agreed. He offered to give her a ride home, and she accepted. As they drove back, he thought about how much training he had done. Curious to see how he had progressed, he decided to check his physical condition. Just as Renee was changing her pants, the screen displayed his stats: half-demon, orientation, chaotic, talent switching places, second level, and traits such as darkness and pride's eye. His mana is 1,321, up from 1,297. Note that the increase was small, only 24 points, even though he practices mana control techniques every night. He realized he was in a slow growth phase, and started thinking about an elixir to speed things up. At this point, Renee said she was ready. When I asked him what he was doing, he just shrugged. The two of them walked to the huge dormitory building. Adel said goodbye to Renee and wished her a good night, and she said the same to him. He was about to collapse from exhaustion, so he ran to his room with an instruction sheet that said, "Go up the stairs and take a right." He looked at his admission sheet and saw that his room was number 407. When he reached the 4th floor, he started asking himself who his roommate would be, and he hoped it would be someone smart and respectful, someone who could be an ally in the future. The thought of having his first serious friend in the world made him feel a little excited. He opened the door and began a polite greeting. Unfortunately, our hero's luck was terrible. When he entered the classroom, he was frozen in place. There was a student sitting on one of the beds eating a candy bar. It was Samuel. Adel looked at him in disbelief and asked himself, "What is Samuel doing in my dorm?" Samuel looked at him angrily with the same question on his mind, and signed the candy out of his hand in surprise. A moment later, Adel was cursing his bad luck. Of all people, why should he share a room with this particular person? They looked at each other in silence, until Samuel broke the silence with a growl, cursing our hero, and telling him, "You filthy mongrel." The word made Adel think for a moment that he was going to get rid of him immediately, but he sighed, and decided to postpone the fight. Adel stood up abruptly, which startled Samuel, who asked him in a sharp tone if he wanted to fight. Adel calmly replied that he would just go out for a while, and said that fighting in the dormitory would cause them trouble. He wished him a quiet night with short, polite words and turned to leave. Samuel muttered angrily, describing Adel as obnoxious and annoying. Adel was seething with anger and decided to walk around until the idiot fell asleep. He couldn't understand why Samuel was so angry, especially since he is not from the anger family in the first place. He thought he was the heir to the gluttony family and asked himself if his anger had anything to do with his nature, like Adel's chaos trait. He began to think about what chaos meant, and whether it was just a mana trait. He thought for a moment about going back to his information sheet, but decided not to, because he thought that if she could explain what chaos was, she would have done so when she taught him about the body's abilities. There was no point in wasting money. Frustrated by the lack of answers and his own ignorance of the subject, he looked for a quiet place to practice mana techniques. He found a secluded spot under a huge tree and noticed a small bird standing on a branch. The presence of such an ordinary creature in the Demon Academy was both strange and cute at the same time. He thought about it for a while and realized that it was interesting to have damaged wild creatures in sight. Late that night, Adel snuck back to his dormitory. Luckily for him, Samuel was fast asleep. Adel threw himself on the bed, feeling like he could pass out at any moment. But because he was disciplined, he decided to do a little mana practice before going to sleep. He stretched out on his back and started spinning the mana around his body. Samuel was standing silently by his bedside, his eyes shining with a dim light. He was watching Adel sleep. Adel's sleeping form was very provocative and stupid to him, and his features looked stupid even when he was unconscious. What made him even angrier was Adel's insult to his family. Although he admitted that he was partly responsible for their past fights, his pride wouldn't allow him to apologize first. He sighed, and then turned around and said that he had a lot of responsibilities and things to do, and asked himself why he felt he had to worry about this insignificant idiot, who was just an unnecessary burden. But he can't forget the energy that Adel showed in the first class, which made his heart ache. It felt like a familiar sensation, but he couldn't remember when he felt it. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain. He bent over, sobbing as the pain spread through his body. He cursed as he realized that his greed had kicked in again, causing him to feel an uncontrollable hunger. The pain was unbearable. It felt like his insides were drying up and turning to dust. Adel mumbled something unintelligible in his sleep and shifted slightly. The sound made Samuel more nervous. The mere fact that he had to endure seeing his smug face until morning was a form of torture. The urge to hit him with the pen was irresistible. Finally, the next day came, and the morning light entered the room. Adel moved and stirred, asking himself, is it really morning already? His eyes gradually became accustomed to the light coming from the window. He looked out the window and saw a bird on the tree branch, the same bird he had seen yesterday, and said, it looks like there was a visitor earlier this morning. But his presence was uncomfortable. Sight is very sensitive to any intrusion from the ground, and it's difficult to let a non-student enter. He became skeptical and said, someone must be watching me. He thought it was Coach Aries because he was the one he was most suspicious of. He quickly checked the bird with his mana to see if it was alive or just an illusion. He thought about trying to tame it with food and started making bird sounds to attract it. When he looked around, he realized that Samuel's bed was empty. My roommate must have broken his fast by now, he said. Edel understood that he had to catch up before the food was gone, but he stopped abruptly because he had no idea where the dining hall was. By the time he reached the classroom, Teacher Ida had already entered, greeted everyone with a bright smile and said, "Good morning." Edel was sitting there quietly, and annoyed that his gesture had cost him breakfast. He was worried that hunger would make him unable to concentrate. Idia called everyone's attention and announced that she had an important announcement, and made sure everyone was present. She said that in today's class, they would choose a class representative. This sudden announcement caused a student to raise his hand and ask about the selection process. Idia explained that she was going to vote, but changed her mind and will choose the actor herself. Rand smiled, confidently and loudly praised the teacher's decision. It was clear that she expected to be chosen. Edel thought of this detail from the novel. Rand was supposed to be the actress because Samuel is not naturally suited for leadership. Rand stood up and proudly declared that everyone should treat her as their queen, and laughed her condescending laugh. Despite her personality, Edel admitted that Rand wasn't exactly a bad choice. She lacked intelligence but had charisma and useful support skills. Whispers spread among the students. There were those who thought Edel looked more competent, but the idea of a half-demon being the class representative was quickly dismissed. One suggested Samuel, but others thought he was too scary. Adele felt a little amused when he heard his name mentioned for a moment. It was clear that Rand was definitely going to win. Idia urged for the decision to be announced quickly. The teacher sighed and then said that the class representative was not Rand's trainee. Rand froze, and her confident look turned into a surprised expression. Idia smiled, her eyes sparkling, and announced that the class representative was Edel. The name rang out in the suddenly silent hall and landed directly on Edel. He looked up, completely stunned, and the whole thing was ridiculous to him. What was Idia thinking when she appointed a half-demon as the class representative? The teacher went straight to him and expressed her hope that he would lead the class well. Still surprised, he responds with a hesitant yes. Then Idia explained that she had another class to teach, so she would quickly announce the rest and move on. Idia said, in preparation for the midterm exam, the next few classes will focus heavily on hands-on practice. Samuel made a disgruntled sound. The teacher explained that the hands-on exercises would be done in teams of 3, and everyone would have to form a team by the end of the day. The therapist's face turned pink when she heard this news. Edel, based on the information he had about the site practical exam, was almost certain that it would involve killing people. First and foremost, killing was an essential part of combat training in this place. Idia announced the end of today's class, but suddenly called out to Rand with a smile and a warning. She warned her that if she dared to speak to her in such an informal manner again, she would have to take special lessons next time. Rand trembled and clearly understood the threat. Edel admirably observed how Idia was stopping the arrogant heiress. Before she walked away, Edel gave her final instructions, and Edel thought that he was the new class president, so he would have to present the team report before the end of the day, and wish the rest of the class luck. Edel thought about the practical side of the exams, and whether they would take them seriously, because using Idia's puppets was out of the question. If teams are needed, and he knew from the storyline that the big incident involving the attack on the human world was still to come. The most important task at hand was to assemble a proper team. As far as the pink-haired healer is concerned, he had already decided who most of his team members would be. Meanwhile, in another part of the academy, Teacher Aries was walking with grim determination. He found Idia sitting in her office. He walked in unannounced and called her name in a sharp tone. Idia looked at him calmly, and he, with burning eyes, demanded to know what she was thinking. She responded with a slight smile and said that she had never seen him look so serious, and that he was kind of cute. Aries wasn't in the mood for jokes, so he sharply replied that now was not the time for jokes, and asked her to explain why she made Edel class president. Idia commented, "You seem to have a lot of eyes on sight," but his knowledge of the appointment so quickly didn't surprise her. Aries asked her if she really understood the consequences of giving Ideli authority over the class. Idia confirmed that she did, and explained that she had given Ideli temporary authority over the class. Aries banged his fist on the desk, shouting that she was out of her mind. He angrily yelled that there was still time and that she should change the class leader immediately. He angrily told her that if she didn't, but Idia favored Hadia, clasped her hands and said coldly that she didn't want to change the class president. Aries put his hands on his head and shouted that her stubbornness was driving him crazy. Idia explained that she likes Adele, that his skills are top-notch, and that he's not as arrogant as the heirs of the seven sins. Not to mention that his identity is guaranteed by the support of the Paris family. Ares responded by saying that a documented identity does not necessarily mean he is trustworthy, and that a blind sword, meaning someone whose intentions are unknown, is the most dangerous kind of weapon. Edie sighed tiredly, as if she was tired of his insistence, then stood up and confidently said she would handle everything herself, told him to stay out of it, and said she was confident in her ability to spot talent, even if it was a new school. As she walked away, Ares called out to her in an angry tone, but she shook him off. He muttered a curse as he twisted his back angrily, regretting that he hadn't taken over the class leadership himself. The idea of letting someone so dangerous under Edia's supervision was a big mistake. More importantly, the half-demon, who had received an unforgettable wound on his body in the previous battle, for some reason, was almost as awe-inspiring as Adele. Although the likelihood of a direct blood connection between them was low, the strange resemblance in their auras was too suspicious to ignore. It was too disturbing for Ares to ignore. Still unsure of Adele's true intentions, Ares whistled a sharp whistle, and his bird shook him as he flew through the sky. As he reviewed the information his bird had gathered, he noticed that Adele had not yet done anything suspicious. The little bird flew again and told him to keep a close eye on Adele. Ares decided not to take his eyes off our hero for even a moment. At the academy, the break was full of activity, and the students were enthusiastically forming their teams in preparation for the upcoming practical exercises. Adele was watching them with a slight grin. Despite being the leader of the class, no one had gotten close to him, and he wondered if he looked dangerous or something. At that moment, he heard a voice and turned around to see a student who hesitantly approached Samuel and asked him if he wanted to team up with him. Samuel responded coldly and said he didn't mind as long as the student didn't disrupt him. Adele saw them teaming up and was surprised that someone like Samuel had found a partner when he was alone. He realized that he should be the one to take the first step. On the other side of the room, Luna, the pink-haired therapist, was nervously fiddling with her fingers. She knew, as she expected, that no one would approach a half-demon like her. She needed to join a team before the class ended. As she pondered her choices, Adele suddenly appeared in front of her and greeted her with a simple hello. He examined her magical energy while deliberately releasing some of his own dark energy. Luna gasped, confused by the sudden intrusion in Adele's powerful aura. Adele smiled and said he took a quick look at her mana, which surprised her. He said she had a good mana pool and excellent healing abilities, so she would be a perfect member of his team. Adele reintroduced himself, thought they had met briefly before, and asked if she wanted to join a team. Luna stammered and said no. Adele said, "Great," and asked her for her name. After a moment of hesitation, she said, "My name is Luna." He thanked her for her beautiful and kind name, her determination to join his team, and told her in passing that his position as class leader would benefit her. Luna blushed and mumbled that it was a bit of a surprise. Adele moved closer to her and called her name again, which made her even more nervous. Too, he reminded her that time was short, and pointed out that since they were half-demons, they would probably make a good pair. Under this pressure, she quickly agreed to join his team. Adele smiled and said it was an excellent choice. Suddenly, Ran appeared and asked, "What exactly is so great about this?" Adele thought to himself, when did she even show up? She looked at them and chuckled smugly, commenting that they weren't a team yet. She then grandly offered to take them both under her wing. Adele responded coldly and said that if they are still dedicated to forming a team, she might as well walk away. Rand scoffed and said she heard everything from behind. Luna was confused by the sudden argument. Ran announced that she still didn't recognize Adele's authority as class leader, claimed that she was the real leader, and laughed again. Adele considered rejecting her outright, but saw that she wasn't going to give up easily. Since she kept asking him to join her, he decided to join her with conditions. He said he doesn't mind Ran being the leader of the team, as long as she consults him before making any decisions. Besides, it would be better to keep one of the Seven Sins heirs by his side. Ran agreed, and her confidence grew, telling Luna to trust her and follow her lead. Adele saw that this would be the best plan to use to his advantage. A week passed, and Adele checked his condition again. His mana increased slightly from 1,321 to 1,332, but the growth was frustratingly slow. He really needed an elixir. Adding to his anxiety was his complete inability to understand the chaos trait. He was hoping that the upcoming magic class would give him a few hints. On top of that, Creed's worm toxin began to become unstable, forcing him to carry it with him at all times. There were so many things that needed his attention. At least Samuel had been quiet lately and not making any noise, which was a good thing, a sign that things would gradually get better. The bell on the academy tower clock rang. Teacher Idea entered the classroom, greeting everyone cheerfully. Adele noticed her enthusiasm and wondered if something good had happened. Adele announced that today's class would be special because it would be a field exercise outside the classroom. Adele felt strange and wondered why their first field class would be outside. Idea confirmed that they would be leaving Sight City and going beyond its walls. Their destination is Oregon. Oregon. The name shook Adele. Oregon is the prison where humans who failed to return in the Human-Demon War are locked up. Idea ordered everyone to follow her into the dimension. The rest of the students were whispering excitedly about the idea of going outside, like they were going on vacation. Adele grinned slightly because he knew that if they really knew Oregon DA, their enthusiasm would disappear in an instant. But more important than the training itself was the special opportunity that was hidden in Oregon. The opportunity that his protagonists discovered there. If he were to leave now, he could take it before they did. But meeting it, while avoiding the constant surveillance of so many eyes, especially with guards that are certainly not weak, will be a real challenge. Ran approached him and asked why he was nervous. Adele smoothly evaded and said he was nervous from his first field session. Ran laughed and said she didn't think someone with his gloomy appearance could be nervous at all. Then she puffed out her chest and told him not to worry. She's the team leader and she'll be there. Adele asked himself, doesn't this girl ever get tired? He decided to see if she would still be like that after they got Oregon. However, her simple confidence unintentionally calmed his nerves. The dimensional diameter began to move. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Adele was determined to seize it at all costs. Moments later, the tug whistled, and someone on the loudspeaker announced that the flight had reached its destination and called for passengers to disembark. Adele and his colleagues got off and stood in front of a huge building. Idea greeted them and told them that they had arrived, and asked them to walk behind her. As the students' eyes scanned the place, Adele said, "This is what is expected from a place like this." One of them expressed nervousness about the atmosphere, and another asked if this was really where they were practicing because he didn't feel comfortable. With a confident smile, Idea assures them that this is indeed their training ground, adding that the battles are not expected and there is no need to worry. Adele, for his part, dismissed this apparent reassurance. The whole thing looked suspicious. As the group approached the entrance to the prison, they were intercepted by 3 guards wearing dark uniforms and red armor insignia. One of them asked if they were from Sight. Idea calmly responded, confirmed, and presented the official statement. Adele noticed at that moment that the guard was not ordinary, and the pressure of his presence was palpable. After verification, the guard announced that they could continue and invited them to follow him. Afterward, Idea showed them in. They walked through dark, claustrophobic corridors filled with shadows. As they walked, an M44-like creature crawled across the floor. Most of them didn't notice, but faint sounds of distress began to seep through the walls. Desperate words mumbled in the darkness, "Please save me. I don't want to die. Get me out of here." A student with horns turned around anxiously, and Ran asked in a shaky voice what this place was like. Adele watched them all with a slight smile. He felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction as he realized that his colleagues were finally beginning to understand the reality of the situation. Samuel growled and told them to stop punching and walk away. He seemed completely unaffected, which led Adele to conclude that he was definitely a weirdo. The group made their way deeper into the facility, and the deeper they went, the more tense they became. Adele's face suddenly showed a look of surprise, but the trainer broke the silence and announced that they had finally arrived at the training site. They were now standing in front of a huge multi-story prison complex, under which purple lights saturated with gloom. The students' eyes widened in amazement, and Adele expressed the thought that had gripped them all. This is the true nature of Oregon. This is hell. The word hell was the same word that settled in the minds of all the students. In a moment of silence, horrifying images came back before their eyes. Thin, injured, barely human prisoners locked behind cold bars. Idea went back to explaining the nature of the place, explaining that the prison is for humans who have invaded the demonic realm. Everyone in the prison has killed at least one demon. They are hardened criminals, some of whom don't hesitate to kill pregnant women or children. She then pointed to a thin, chained prisoner in front of them and continued, making sure they knew by now what kind of training they were in for. She told them to watch carefully, her eyes shining as she approached the prisoner. A dark energy began to swirl around her. She grabbed him by the face, ordered him to swallow something, and reassured him that it would be over quickly. In her hand, she created a blue ball of light. Samuel watched with admiration, while Luna covered her mouth in horror. The prisoner began to moan in pain, then let out a shrill scream and his head exploded into tiny particles that splattered on the stone floor with a sickening sound. Adele is surprised and disgusted by the sight. As Idea explained the mission, a wry smile spread across her face. The task was simple in form. The trainees must kill a human being in their own way. Some of the trainees immediately broke down and turned back, unable to bear the horror of the scene. Adele was the only one who didn't seem to be affected, and his face showed an expression of deep thought and emotionlessness. Even though he had witnessed the brutality of death, he didn't feel anything, as if he was gradually losing his senses. His personality began to merge with the original Adele, and he was terrified for a moment. But he promised himself that he would live on, no matter what, and that he would change the end of this cursed world and fulfill Adele's wish to return to his world. Noticing his stillness, Idia looked at him and asked him if he had anything to say. Adele walked over to the cell where a scrawny prisoner was tied up with a dagger in his hand. He remained silent for a moment, then quietly asked the prisoner if he had anything to say. The prisoner raised his face, his eyes filled with sparks of hatred, and said that his only regret was that he couldn't kill more demons like them, and that the humans would take them all out. Without saying a word, Adele plunged the dagger into the prisoner's body, staining himself with blood. He noticed that hearing the prisoner's words before he killed him made him feel faintly satisfied. A dark thought flashed in his mind, but he didn't dwell on it too long. He looked at the trainer, who was watching him, and asked her if that was enough. The trainer responded to his question with a round of applause and announced that his performance was excellent. She then looked at the other trainees and ordered each of them to enter their cells and begin training, just like their class president had done. But she didn't stop there, adding that the half-demon trainees should go back to Laura. Luna was visibly distraught, and the instructor ordered them to stand in a specific area. Adele noticed the situation and thought that only half-demons were separated, which meant that there was more than one person in the class besides him and Luna. Although he realized it, he noticed that Luna looked very distraught, and he was worried. The instructor said that the trainees had specific prisoners to kill, and she pointed to a row of kneeling bodies. When his eyes fell on them, Adele's features froze, because he recognized them immediately. They were half-demons. The trainer continued to speak in a malicious tone, emphasizing that the trainees had to prove that they were different from the traitors. One of the half-demon trainees rushed in, shouting in anger and fear, accusing the prisoners of being the cause of their suffering, and kicking one of them violently. Another one followed, shouting that they deserved to die, and demanding their immediate death. Adele was watching this scene, and his expression grew darker and darker. He knew it was just beginning. Terrifying screams echoed throughout the prison. As the half-demon apprentices continued to attack the prisoners, Samuel Benner was bathed in green light, and then a dark, green, monster-like entity summoned and began to tear them apart. At that moment, Luna screamed in pain as she held her head, tears streaming down her face. Adele watched Samuel's actions and wondered if the magic was really necessary, or if Samuel was just thirsty to tear people apart, or if he just wanted to show off his power. Luna was completely overwhelmed by what she was seeing. Adele noticed her condition and worried that if the instructor noticed her collapse, things could get worse. Meanwhile, Ran walked up to the instructor and spoke to her in a calm voice, saying, "If a trainee kills using her ability, does that count as success?" The instructor answered, "Technically, yes." Ran then looked at one of the humans and issued a command, saying that he was now bound to her, and had to kill the human standing next to him. The prisoner screamed as he grabbed the other man's neck, and the other man tried to talk him out of it. Rand's features remained rigid, with no trace of hesitation or emotion, and the prisoner was slowly suffocating. When it was over, I asked if it was all over. Adele answered, "Ah, you did it. We can work on that kind of laxity over time." At that moment, Adele was watching Ran and thought to himself that, even if she didn't show obvious misanthropy, she had a kindness of heart that he hadn't expected. Then, the trainer turned her attention to the last half-demon still being tested, Luna, and said to her, "There's no one else left." Luna gasped and turned pale. She was shaking uncontrollably and her body couldn't hear her words. Adia smiled, a cruel smile, and told her she had to prove who she was. Adele was watching all this with concern, and realized that if Luna failed to complete the training, the consequences would be dire for her. Trembling, Luna said to herself, I can't do this." She began to blame herself for being pathetic. She went to the academy out of revenge for her mother, who lived a miserable and bitter life because of her father, who doesn't even deserve to be called by that name. Her emotions were so intense that she couldn't control herself, and she started scratching the ground with her hooves in a fit of stress and despair. At that moment, Adele calmly approached her and asked her if she was okay. She was surprised to see him, but he didn't give her anything else. Instead, he distanced himself from her and asked her to wait a moment. He then announced that he was going to help her with her internship. Luna wasn't expecting this, but she saw him pull out his dagger again and offer to start. He handed her the dagger and then carefully held her hand, signaling that she might be afraid, but she should try anyway. He asked her to relax her hands for a moment, then gently instructed her on how to hold the blade, and stood her facing the target she was supposed to kill. He explained to her that if she moved forward steadily while holding the dagger in this way, everything would be fine. Although terror gripped her, she closed her eyes and followed his instructions. Moments later, she opened her eyes to find him gently patting her head and complimenting her on her performance, expressing his admiration for what she had done. Adele was well aware that the situation could be misinterpreted, especially since the fate of a half-blood who fails to attack a human is well known. At best, she would be expelled from the academy. At worst, she wouldn't make it out alive. In the meantime, Instructor Idea stepped up to him, objecting to his behavior. She wasn't convinced that just because Luna did it, it meant it would work. Adele's response surprised her. He assured her that Luna would succeed, pointing out that Idea had already made it clear that all that was required was to eliminate a human being using special abilities. He argued that Luna, as the only healer at the academy, has a valuable talent that deserves to be supported. Idea looked at him in surprise and asked him if that meant he was abandoning those who had no talent. He replied coldly, "Of course I would," was silent for a moment, then, smiling with satisfaction as if she had discovered something new about him, she told him that she would take his words to heart. She told them to stay where they were before she left, and went to check on the rest of the students. Adele was relieved when she walked away. He knew he had avoided a real crisis thanks to his answer that satisfied the teacher. He was sure that if Aris had been the one supervising the training, Luna wouldn't have survived the situation. As soon as the teacher walked away, Adele looked at Luna and told her that she was now safe. Luna, who had reached the limit of her exhaustion, when she heard his words, gave into a feeling of extreme relief and fainted. He caught her before she fell, then propped her up against a wall so she could rest. He smiled slyly, for this was only the beginning of the real game. He knew the academy like the back of his hand, and decided it was time to put his plan into action. He started sneaking through the corridors, avoiding the guards who were at almost every corner, which proved to him that the security was tighter than ever. In order to find the precious opportunity he was looking for, he had to move quickly, so he decided to head to the underground level. Adele utilized the darkness technology that covered his entire body, allowing him to blend in with the darkness around him. He looked at the energy surrounding his body and smiled contentedly, feeling much better than last time and confident in his ability to sneak in easily. His goal now was to reach the entrance to the tunnel leading to the basement. As he emerged from his hiding place to sneak past one of the guards, he sensed danger. He noticed that the guard was radiating a strange energy. Adele felt a sudden panic and suspected that he might have been discovered. He watched as the guard turned around with his red eyes before returning to his normal position as if he sensed something was wrong. Adele took a deep breath and continued on his way, taking advantage of his invisibility, but knew he had to move faster. Moments later, he found himself in front of a familiar metal gate. It was the only empty cell on the first floor, the place that hid the corridor below. Without hesitation, he used the switching technique to jump a few meters into the cell and past the iron bars. But as soon as his feet touched the ground, he realized he had fallen into a trap. He had stepped on a hidden pressure slab that opened a hole underneath him, and he fell into an abyss. He began to fall quickly and quickly thought about what he should do. He thought of details similar to those in his novel, and started counting seconds to estimate the distance to the bottom and how deep he would fall. He pulled out his dagger and threw it down to keep track of his speed and time. As soon as he heard the sound of the dagger piercing something, he used the relocation technique to land safely on solid ground. In front of him was a long corridor, and beside him was a narrow river of dark water that resembled a sewer. He finally reached the underground aqueduct. Once inside, Adele had to face his first threat, the appearance of poisonous slime monsters. These creatures were deadly, killing everything they touched with their powerful venom. In order to defeat them, he needed to target their cores from afar, so he immediately summoned his dark fangs and slammed them into the monsters. Knowing their weaknesses, he was able to take them out easily, allowing him to continue on his way. At the edge of the passageway, he came to a river that he was told he had to dive into. As he dove into the water, a voice in his head warned him, "Don't go down any further, the great evil has been vanquished." The mysterious voice confused our hero, because he had never written about a greater evil in his story. This is the place where the devil has been rebelling for centuries. He began to ask himself, is this greater evil referring to the demon that even the king of demons couldn't vanquish and had to be sealed? As he sold, a point of light began to appear on the horizon. As he approached it, he stepped out of the water and looked around, wondering if he had finally reached his goal. In front of him was a skeleton, chained and bolted, with a carefully preserved heart on the face of the skeleton. He said this was the opportunity he was looking for. As he approached the heart with his hand outstretched, a smile of excitement spread across his face. But he was surprised by a strong energy that shook his body. The heart, which had been dark and dead, suddenly began to beat with a deep red color and turbulent energy. Suddenly, the skeleton moved like crazy, and a fiery light shone in its empty eyes. With each heartbeat, the body rose into the air, and a cross appeared on its back, illuminated by a fiery energy. Adele couldn't believe what she was seeing. The symbol of the cross is the same as the tattoo of Arsene's family on his neck. This means that the traitor who betrayed the demon kingdom was related to the Arsene family. While the skeleton was being energized, I gave Adele a mental message telling him that if he can hear his voice, it means he carries the same burden. He carries the blood of chaos because he was born from it, and he must not allow chaos to swallow him because it is the force that distorts the order and rules of the world. He warned him that getting lost in the idea could lead to his own demise. As he spoke, the skeleton began to disintegrate into ashes, as the fatty energy that had kept him alive to deliver the final message faded away. His heart returned to its original state, and he fell to the ground dead. Adele approached it and carefully picked it up. When he touched it, he felt a tremendous energy coursing through his body, the energy of an entity that loves destruction. The heart crumbled, but Adele realized that the desire was a need inherited from Arsene's lineage. When he opened the stats screen, he noticed an obvious change in his abilities. He had gained the skill of telekinesis. This made him scream with joy. He placed the dagger on the palm of his hand and activated the skill. The object began to float in the air, but quickly fell back down. He realized that the skill didn't fail due to a lack of mana, but due to his poor control of it. That's why he knew he needed to train hard to fully master it. He also found a new chaos-related clue in addition to obtaining the rare skill, which was an unexpectedly great accomplishment. Since the place was completely empty and there was nothing else to take, he decided to return before anyone noticed his absence. When he returned, Ran stopped him and asked him what he was doing, wandering around by himself. He gave her an unconvincing excuse and told her that he had gone for a walk, but she didn't believe him and yelled at him, objecting to the simplicity of what he said. Adele ran away from the situation and said that he just wanted to get away from the horrible scene in the corridor. Then he started walking and left her while she was talking angrily, without caring about her, because he had something else on his mind. He noticed Luna's absence. As soon as he thought of her, she approached him and quietly called out to him. When he saw her, he joked with her and asked her if she slept well, and she smiled and shook her head, which made him feel a little relieved. He then went on to tell her that she was sleeping so soundly that anyone could have easily taken her. She gave him a shy smile and thanked him, and he told her, knowing that she owed him now and that the day would come when he would have to pay her back. While they were talking, Miss Edia approached, drew everyone's attention, and told them to assemble. She then announced the end of the internship and said she was pleased that not a single student had dropped out, even though they still had a lot of work to do. She said that what they had done today was an important step in honing their skills and developing their abilities. She then announced that it was time to go back to site and had arrived. All the students rejoiced at the decision to return, with Adele being the most excited because he saw this as an opportunity to escape before he was exposed. Time flew by, and a week had passed since they returned from the school trip without much change, as if the fear that had gripped the half-demons after the experience of killing humans had begun to disappear. Adele was diligently practicing his new skill of telekinesis, while at the same time preparing for the midterm exams that the teachers never talk about. In the novel he had written, the first-year students of Citan were attacking the royal school during the exams, which meant that the midterm exams would see a breakthrough into the human world. As he looked around, he wondered how many students would survive. As he thought about it, he caught Luna's eye, but she quickly looked away, which worried him because she looked like she didn't want anything to do with them. He was even more nervous when he saw her settle down and rest her head on the couch. In a moment she wasn't expecting, someone touched her shoulder, and she jumped up, startled, and found Adele standing next to her smiling. He was trying to make fun of her, thinking she was ignoring him on purpose. He quickly changed his tone and became serious and asked her if there was something wrong with her, because she didn't look good. She immediately denied it, clasping her hands together to try to reassure him. He looked at her skeptically and asked her again, but she reaffirmed that she was fine. He decided not to press her further and invited her to have lunch with him. She seemed hesitant for a moment, as if she didn't understand what he was saying. When he asked her if she had any other plans, she regained her composure and smiled, agreeing to his suggestion. They agreed to meet in front of the cafeteria at lunchtime. Although Luna's mood was volatile, she was easy to talk to, and Adele noticed that she wasn't as afraid of him as before, so he assumed that their trip to Oregon had helped improve his image. The cafeteria building had a grandiose ceiling that signaled the prestige of the academy. Adele stood in front of the stairs leading up to the building, waiting for Luna Tig. So many minutes had passed that it was almost lunchtime, and he began to suspect that she was not coming. Since he wasn't used to eating alone, he decided to go back to the dormitory because he had no other choice. But just as he was about to walk away, he saw two girls approaching, Renee and Diana, and they were talking to each other. He was very confused when he saw them together and they didn't notice his presence, so he decided to run away immediately using his switching skill. In the meantime, Renee looked around and sensed something wasn't right. Diana asked her if there was something wrong, and Renee looked around for a moment, then sighed and told her that she thought she saw her bodyguard, but she was delusional. In fact, Adele was hiding about a meter away from them behind a bush, wondering what had brought the two of them here. He was worried that having Rennie and Diana in the same place was a very dangerous combination, especially since he had heard some things about Organ that made him realize that he would be killed immediately if it was revealed that he was from the Arsene family, the family that played a role in the destruction of the Demon Kingdom. What's worse, he's the one who killed the Demon King and his wife. He decides to leave the place immediately. Luckily for him, the girls didn't care about him and continued towards the dining hall and walked away. Adele chewed his lip as he told himself to be more careful. As he turned around, he realized that the place he had come to while running away was even more beautiful than he had expected. He wondered if there was really a place like this on campus, and thought it would be better to train here than in his cramped dormitory. Suddenly, he heard a girl screaming. As soon as he recognized the sound, he ran towards the source and the back of the building. There, he saw Luna with an angry student holding her tightly, and several students around her giving her sharp looks. When he looked at her, she looked surprised and reassured at the same time. Once he looked at the group, he immediately understood the situation. Despite the smile he gave to everyone, Adele looked truly evil. He told them, or rather ordered them, to go back to their classes, while asking them why they were behaving that way with their classmate. A large young man with his teeth clenched in anger, trying to intimidate Adele with his body, approached and mocked him, saying that he was only acting like that because he was half-blood like her. He then went on to sneer that having a half-blood as a class representative doesn't make sense. He also said that no matter how strong he was, he couldn't stand up to the three of them. As soon as he heard this, our hero released a black aura that surrounded the big guy and lifted him off the ground. The other two students who were with him were too afraid to intervene because they sensed the murderous intent and were paralyzed by fear. Adele mocked their behavior, mocking their helplessness at the slightest hint of his murderous intent, even though they dared to attack him. Under the pressure of the aura, the huge young man fell to the ground, coughing, as if the air had been sucked out of his lungs. As he was getting rid of him, Adele noticed another student, a young man with a tattoo of a spider on his cheek. He wasn't as scared as the others. On the contrary, he was quietly watching him and analyzing the situation, which made him feel that something was different. When Adele saw the look of concern in Luna's eyes, he withdrew his combat intentions, said he wasn't going to fight, and asked everyone to stop. Just then, a young man ran up to his big friend and asked Adele nervously, "What do you think you're doing?" Adele gave him a devilish spit that broke his courage, warned him not to say another word, and said that it was not yet lunchtime, and he had no desire to see someone's sporadic wrestling before he ate. The students dismissed their classmate and withdrew, but the young man with the spider tattoo gave Adele one last look of defiance. Our hero noticed this young man's calmness and realized that there was another gem here besides Luna, and said he should go after him next. Luna approached Adele, asked him if he was okay, and thanked him again for his help. Adele was relieved and took her to his side as he reminded her that the lesson was about to begin, and told her that they were finally going to start learning real magic. Luna's eyes lit up with a sincere smile, and she felt like she had found someone she could trust. When they entered the classroom, the professor was standing in front of the blackboard. He greeted them, then grabbed everyone's attention and said that today's lesson would be dedicated to learning 2 spells that can be used in real-life situations: the art of stealth and silence. Adele was surprised. It was time to learn his specialty. The professor began by asking, "How do we deal with a stronger enemy on the battlefield?" He answered that the solution is assassination, and explained that this is not an option, but a necessity, because none of the trainees here can defeat a human hero like Lelouch. When he heard the truth, Samuel huffed angrily. At that moment, the professor decided to demonstrate the art of invisibility, his body gradually turning transparent as he explained to the students the steps to perform it. He explained that they had to slowly heat up and feel the mana flowing around them, and then gradually release it to create a thin layer around the entire body, because any imperfection in the coverage of the body would mean failure of the art. Adele listened intently to the professor's instructions, who disappeared from view after his explanation ended without a trace. While many students were amazed, Adele concluded that this ability was the reason why he didn't notice the professor when he suddenly appeared during the fight with Samuel. With a snap of his fingers, the professor unraveled the art and reappeared, saying that the goal of the lesson was to learn how to wrap the body in mana. He then introduced the training steps that everyone, including our hero, began to follow. He told them to close their eyes and handle the mana slowly, telling them not to worry because even if they disappeared, they could still see their bodies. The trainees began to try, some of them grinding their teeth and others just trying to feel the mana. The teacher noticed their efforts and expected that it would take at least half a day for them to make any progress. However, he was quickly impressed by Rand's level of control over a large amount of mana, as would be expected from a member of the 7 deadly sins. What surprised the professor the most was Samuel, whose body was the first to start turning transparent, showing a rare innate talent. The professor smiled as he adjusted his glasses, noting that what would normally take a week of training was accomplished in minutes by geniuses. Then, the professor thought of another student, Adele, a student who has the trait of chaos, and thought that Mr. Aries had asked them to treat him with extreme caution. When he looked at Adele's location, he saw nothing but transparent traces of mana leaking from the place. That's when he realized he'd been tricked, because Adele had been standing right in front of him for seconds. Adele, still invisible, smiled wryly and told himself it was too easy. After class was over, Adele left the auditorium, and thanks to his natural talent, disappearing was easy. The real challenge now was how to integrate this art with the anarchic theme, so he decided to go back to the dormitory to experiment. He knew that this skill, even though it was designed for stealthy strikes, would be useless against enemies much stronger than him, so he needed other ways to strengthen his abilities. On the way to the dormitory, the professor stood him up enthusiastically. Adele was surprised and asked if there was something wrong. The professor answered him honestly and asked him, "Is this your first time learning magic at the Satan Academy?" Adele nodded his head in agreement and emphasized that this is the first time he has tried this kind of magic, but he has always felt that he has natural talents. The professor smiled and raised his hand, rubbing his head as if he had just understood Adele's mastery of the art of invisibility. Then, unexpectedly, he offered to visit his lab. Adele was surprised by the invitation and asked him why. The professor was not vague, and answered quite frankly that it was not only because of his unique talent in magic, but also because he has the rare trait of chaos, a trait that has great value in the field of research. Although Adele understood what the professor wanted, he wasn't convinced that his skills went beyond using them for stealthy attacks. Feeling that he had something special to offer, he decided to temporarily decline the offer, explaining that he had some things to finish first. Despite the disappointment on the professor's face for a moment, a slight smile returned when he heard Adele's promise to come back. Adele walked away, thinking to himself, "I have to maintain my image as a brilliant student who is not to be underestimated." A few minutes later, he crossed the campus and arrived at his dormitory. When he entered his dormitory, Samuel was nowhere to be found, giving him the freedom he needed to begin his training. There was one thing he wanted to master before the midterm exams. Besides the art of concealment, there was a human spy hidden in the demon world who posed a real threat, and Adele planned to eliminate him. But before that, he needed to master his trump card. He sat on his bed and unleashed the mana that began to come out of his body in the form of a light vapor, seeping out of his skin and enveloping his entire body. He began his training and said, "It's no longer enough to hide my existence. I have to make my existence invisible." He wanted to remain undetected, as if he were nothing. While the aura was covering his body, he actually began to transform into a transparent body. He became so concentrated that he couldn't even see his own body with his own eyes. Suddenly, he felt a sense of urgency and asked himself anxiously, "What's going on?" Suddenly, breathing became difficult, and things started to get worse. He tried to distract the mana and cancel the skill, but he couldn't. Panic began to creep in. He had to stop it immediately, or he would disappear completely. With all his concentration, he screamed loudly. After an exhausting struggle, he was finally able to cancel the skill, but his senses were distorted and his perception of time remained disturbed. The experience of losing control was terrifying, and the worst part was that he wouldn't have been able to undo it if the mana hadn't ended, making it difficult to control. If it hadn't, he would have lost his entire self. He finally understood what the ancestor meant when he warned him that chaos could swallow him up. Still, he could not give up this trump card. The art of combining invisibility and chaos was a unique weapon if used correctly. He decided to call the skill Absolute Invisibility. Just as he was about to collapse from exhaustion, his annoying coworker burst into the room and shoved him with all his might. Samuel yelled at him nonstop, but Adele didn't hear a thing. Suddenly, he realized he couldn't even hear his own voice. He had a terrifying thought. He could have been killed. After things calmed down a bit in the dorm, and his hearing gradually returned, Adele decided to continue testing the new art in the outskirts of Satan, where people were less likely to interfere. The next time, he was able to control it better. Fortunately, his hearing was lost this time, but it was his eyesight that was lost. Adele became convinced that absolute invisibility comes from sacrificing one or more of his senses. He spent an entire week testing and optimizing the technology, during which time he lost hearing, taste, touch, and sight at different times. The good news is that the sensory loss was temporary, lasting about 2 hours. The bad news was that there was no way to predict which sense would be affected each time. In its current state, it could only keep the art safe for about 3 seconds, making it impractical for real-world use. An art that requires risking everything for a brief moment of effectiveness is not an ideal choice. However, if it comes down to a critical killing blow, it might be worth the risk. Aside from developing absolute invisibility, Adele has also experimented with combining chaos energy with other attributes, but none of these experiments have yielded useful results so far. As such, the most obvious path for him was to improve his dueling skills and increase his mana. Locked in the woods, he spent up to 2 hours counting. Since he used to train early in the morning, he wasn't worried about being late for class. Today, the class was under the supervision of Coach Aries. As soon as Adele regained his sight, he joined the others and ran like his life depended on it. Weeks went by, and the class still focused entirely on physical endurance rather than actual sword techniques. After a grueling session of endurance training, Aries ordered everyone to assemble. As the class representative, Adele is used to relaying instructions from the instructor to his classmates, a position that, of course, still bothers Samuel. After a few more visits, Adele announced, "Finally, the time for physical fitness training is over, and the official sword and fencing lessons are about to begin." Adele wasn't the only one among the trainees who took a breath when he heard that the never-ending running would be slowing down, and was excited to finally start learning something practical. Aries told them he was going to show them the first show, drew his sword, and signaled for Adele to step forward. Adele had no choice but to refuse, so he did so. Aries asked him if he could pump mana into his weapon, and Adele answered in the affirmative. Aries then ordered him to pump all the mana into his weapon and attack with all his might. As a deterrent, the trainer said that he would not use any mana, only his physical strength. Adele immediately understood that this was a ploy to embarrass and humiliate him in front of the rest of the class. Before the attack began, Adele checked to see if the instructor would only use a sword, and Aries assured him that he would. Then, instead of choosing a long sword, Adele chose a dagger. Even though he was allowed to use mana, summoning chaos properties would have been overkill, and he saw this as a good opportunity to test Aries' abilities. He launched himself at him, and through a series of back and forth attacks, Adele was able to realize that there were no obvious gaps. By human standards, Aries is at least at the level of an advanced expert. But in the demon world, dueling was not measured by form or technique, but by the amount of mana pumped into the weapon. Human titles like Sword Master or Expert carry no weight here. For most people, just pumping mana into a sword is a challenge. It was clear that Aries didn't take Adele's skills seriously, and it hurt his pride. As such, he had no choice but to exceed all expectations. He took off like a rocket, aiming for Aries' right carotid artery. But as expected, the strike was not as easy to execute. Aries smoothly shifted his legs and dodged the attack. Adele hesitated, quickly twisted his wrist and launched another attack from his back. The maneuver intended to target his blind spot, but Aries laughed it off as an incomplete attack. Then, while showing off his physical strength, the dagger hit him without even raising his guard. Adele is surprised. A moment later, Aries launched a devastating attack with a single blow that struck Adele's spine and knocked him to the ground with force, setting off an explosion. The trainees watched in silence. Adele cried out violently as he desperately tried to catch his breath, but the attack didn't stop there. Aries raised his huge sword, the air became suffocating, and the sword came down with deadly force. Adele realized he was going to die. The ground exploded under the impact of the blow. Even Samuel, who usually enjoys this kind of violence, was visibly disturbed. Fortunately, Adele was able to react in time, and thanks to his telekinesis, he was able to change the sword's trajectory slightly. Had it been a moment later, it would have been cut in half. Aries noticed a disturbance in the trajectory of his strike. Adele got to his feet and asked him if he was trying to kill him, but Aries shrugged, pulled the dagger out of his body, and denied the charge. He then threw Adele's weapon on the ground and silently ordered him back to his seat. Then, in front of everyone, Haas asked him what he learned during the fight experience. Adele answered that it was the style of the week. Aries asked him what he meant, and Adele replied that the tactics used by Aries were the tactics used by the week. He explained that even though he was allowed to use mana, the instructor imposed restrictions on himself. Through his analysis, Adele realized that Aries was trying to send a message. The only way for a weaker fighter to defeat a stronger opponent is to sacrifice a need in order to have a chance to crush his opponent's bones. He pointed out that Aries could have avoided the second blow, but he chose to receive it deliberately, sacrificing himself to create an opening. The class was surprised when Aries acknowledged the validity of Adele's analysis, explaining that this was exactly the lesson he wanted them to learn. He then explained that the human world contains monsters of unimaginable power, and that confronting such a powerful force requires ruthless tactics. He emphasized that demons must lure their enemies into a sense of security, and then strike hard and fast. And sometimes, victory requires one to put oneself in harm's way. He said he wasn't going to teach them chic or noble techniques, but techniques that would be useful in a real battle. From this day forward, the class would not be limited to swords. but would become a general class for all types of weapons. He explained that survival is meaningless if it comes at the cost of defeat. He told them that he would only teach them fencing that guarantees victory, as winning is the only thing that matters to him. He added that from now on, they would call the class Weapon Arts. Adele realizes that Aries' goal is to prepare them for the upcoming midterms. At this point, the Imperial Human Academy must be on high alert, as the spy who infiltrated Satan must have leaked the current situation. In the novel, Satan's trainees are slaughtered, while Imperial Academy students emerge completely unscathed. Adele knew that Aries probably suspected that he was a traitor. If he wanted to clear his name, he needed to find out who the first real spy was. After the chaotic performance, Aries ended the class, and the other trainees returned to their classrooms, but Adele was still standing there. Aries looked at him and asked him if he was going to complain about what happened. Adele replied with a smile and denied it. But when the instructor turned his face, Adele exploded with anger. At the academy, Adele was thinking that Aries couldn't help him because he couldn't rely on someone he didn't trust. Aries hated Adele's cold and violent side, but giving up his cruelty is not an option for Adele, it's his nature. In order to rise through the ranks and reach a level that allows him to subdue the heirs of the Seven Sins, he needs that killer instinct. However, if Aries gets out of line again like he did today, Adele swears he will make him regret it. While he was lost in his thoughts, Luna approached him. She sensed the remnants of his murderous intent and looked at him with concern. Adele apologized and said he didn't mean to scare her. She smiled this time and said she had come to make up for the lunch they had missed yesterday. Adele accepted her invitation without hesitation, and Noor's face lit up with excitement. In the dining hall, the two of them ordered meals fit for royalty, not trainees. Adele couldn't remember the last time he had eaten so luxuriously. The table in front of them was covered with fancy dishes. Luna glanced at the feast and said that if they missed anything, the gluttony ruler could come after them. But before they started eating, the bullies that Adele had insulted earlier entered the dining hall and stared at him and Luna. The atmosphere was tense for a moment, but before they could do anything stupid, Adele consulted them, and that was enough to make the three of them back off. However, the spider-tattooed man didn't take his eyes off Adele and kept an eye on him. Adele asked Luna about anything that happened between her and the bullies. She said they were targeting her, and she didn't understand why. She blamed herself and said it was because she was weak. Adele realizes that she doesn't know that her gift of healing is very precious. Luna went on to say that the bullying never escalated to physical violence, just whispering curses when they passed her, and sometimes stealing her coins. When Adele first heard this, he advised her to stay close to him from now on, but she insisted that she didn't need protection, and said she just wanted to prove that she wasn't a traitor to the demons. Adele told her that this was exactly why she was staying with him. She didn't understand what he meant. He asked her about the boy with the spider tattoo. She told him his name was Kyle. The name was familiar to Adele, and after he inquired further, he learned that Kyle was a pure-blooded demon. To Luna, Kyle was an annoying person, and she said he looked down on her and other half-demons. He asked her if she meant that he saw them as insects, to which she replied, yes. Adele thought to himself that Kyle's outlook was similar to his view of humans in Oregon, and began to doubt him. He thought about using a data sheet to confirm his theory, but that would require money, and he didn't have it. That's why Adele decided to investigate on his own, as the evidence he had was more than enough. Without any preliminaries, he got up and walked over to the three desks with a friendly greeting. The students were immediately confused. Adele mentioned a rumor he had heard about a girl in her first year at the Imperial Academy, a half-demon with only one living relative. From the moment the words left Adele's mouth, Kyle's expression changed. Even though he remained seated, his body began to radiate tension. To add more pressure, Adele mentioned the name of the girl named Ray. Kyle glared at him angrily. The big man lost his temper and walked over to Adele and told him to walk away, grabbing his shoulder and trying to rip it off. But Adele grabbed the green-haired boy's tie and banged his head on the couch, saying, "It looks like the right name." Then he quietly got up and turned around without saying anything. He didn't make a face, but Adele was watching him and said to himself, "I've got you." In the bathroom, the three of them regrouped. The green-haired boy cursed Adele and called him a mongrel bastard. He then turned to Kyle and asked him if he was going to retaliate. When Kyle didn't answer, Green got even angrier and said, "Aren't you the one who told us from the beginning not to look at half-demons, that you started it all, and why are you backtracking now?" But Kyle remained silent. Green grabbed his costume collar, but without hesitation, Kyle grabbed his head and slammed it into the wall. The blow was brutal, and blood started pouring out of his throat and neck. Kyle didn't stop there. He threw another punch, this time with no mercy, as he said, "Don't you ever smile. They're just annoying bugs." The blonde-haired man screamed in horror as he asked Kyle why he was doing this. Kyle glared at him and said, "Take this idiot and get out of my sight before I kill you both." Alone, Kyle washed his hands, wondering how Adele could see him through the camouflage spell. He checked his camouflage spell and said that it was perfectly cast by one of the best magicians in the world, and it would be hard to tell who he was. It didn't make sense, he wasn't even human. He was a half-demon, and the likelihood of detection was almost nil. It occurred to him for a moment that Adele could be a spy from the human world as well, but he dismissed the idea, as Aunt Paris had personally checked Adele's background. Still, he wondered, who is this Adele, and how did he know about his little sister? Darkness began to fill his features, and he declared that he would kill Adele before he could reveal his identity. Next, Kyle entered a room illuminated by a dim violet light. He pulled out knives and weapons and arranged them neatly on the table. He grabbed a blade and knelt down, ready to write an encrypted message about what he had discovered. He wrote that a student named Adele had revealed his identity. But before he could write anything else, Adele slammed the door and stormed into the hallway. Kyle froze. Adele said, "Were you going to be late? How did you find me?" How? Kyle asked, but Adele replied, "Good evening." Kyle got nervous and threw the pen at him, saying, "The evening would have been fine without you." Adele easily dodged the pen as he said, "We're going to have a good time." But before he could add anything, a lightning strike from the next round would have hit him. Adele noticed that Kyle was using the other round's magic and said, "You don't look like you're trying to pretend anymore. Your fake appearance was a magical illusion as well. You look like you're on the side of demons." At the time, he didn't deny it. Kyle said that Adele had figured it all out, and then asked him how he knew Ray, trying to dodge the lightning bolts. Adele noticed that the first thing on Kyle's mind, even at that moment, was his sister. He thought to himself that Kyle was doing this not because of the humans, but because of Ray, a girl born with a cursed heart that accumulates mana and humans can't control, so he allied himself with the humans to cure her of this difficult disease. Kyle continued his attack, while asking Adele to answer him, but Kyle looked like he didn't know what he was talking about. Adele smiled and decided to provoke him, telling him that he had never met Ray, but her miserable, tear-stained smile was so beautiful that he wanted to break it. Kyle's last bit of patience ran out, and he shouted angrily, cursing Adele and saying, "You bastard." But Adele smiled sarcastically and suggested that if he really wanted to be a spy, he could take it up a notch and say, "Shut up, Kerberos. It's a curse word in the language of demons." Kyle said that before killing him, he would make him confess to everything. Adele responded by telling him that he had been set up. In a fit of rage, Kyle attacked him, but Adele switched places with a lightning ball and dodged the attack. Kyle was shocked to discover that his opponent had the ability to teleport, and Adele confirmed this and said that Kyle had already completed his background investigation. Kyle realized that Adele had known his identity all along. Adele said, "That's obvious," and thought to himself that Kyle now fully understood that he had no chance of winning. In a moment of desperation, Kyle roared and said he was going to fight with all his might. Adele didn't expect this, because Kyle started using the third round magic and looked like he was going to fire at least 20 plus projectiles, which was beyond our hero's expectations. Adele asked himself, "Is this going to be easy for me?" Kyle started his attack, and Adele did the same, activating the second level switch skill. Kyle was expecting this, but Adele was one step ahead of him, so he did it again, and this time he stayed behind him, surprising Kyle, who didn't think Adele would be able to use the skill so many times in a row. Our hero released dark energy to wrap around Kyle, who couldn't understand what was going on. Adele said, "Faint for a bit," then hit him in the back of the head, knocking him unconscious, and said, "I finally got you." Moments later, Adele looked around the room and found many ways to kill him, and asked himself, "Shall I just kill him?" But he changed his mind, he still needed more information. Also, his sister Ray would kill him if he did that, as Kyle is easier to deal with than his sister. Ray mostly got the main hero's help and became contracted to the dragon and fully recovered from her illness. Getting a dragon's heart and gaining the ability to control mana will allow her to grow up to be a great witch, as befits the protagonist of the story. Thus, if she decides to avenge her brother with all her might, he's definitely not going to come out unscathed, and that's because their relationship is so special. Also note that Kyle's transmitter is designed to transmit, not receive, so there's a good chance he thinks Ray is still recovering from her illness. The other issue is that he can't leave him now, and I wish he had a way to tame him. Kyle started to wake up, and Adele had an idea. Kyle moved and opened his eyes quickly to find Adele asking him, "Are you finally awake?" Surprised, Kyle looked at his body and asked himself, "What's he up to?" Adele asked, "What is he up to?" Kyle replied, "Why don't you kill him and wait until he's awake?" Adele said, "It's true I woke you up, but who told you I didn't do anything while you were sleeping?" To Kyle's surprise, Adele showed him something that Kyle seemed to know, and asked him if he knew how to control the poison worm. Adele replied, "Yes," and added that this parasite is called Sang. and it can kill anyone living in its vicinity with a simple stimulus, and its power only manifests itself if it inhabits two bodies at the same time. Kyle looked frightened and asked him what he had done to him and what was the deal with the two bodies. Adele said, "What you're thinking is right, the other half is inhabiting your sister Ray's body." Kyle was shocked, and our hero went on to say that his sister has an interesting body and her ability to interact with mana is so great that her heart can't handle it, so the parasite was able to enter her body easily. Even though your sister's body is rare, she can still be cured, Kyle said, shaking with fear. Kyle asked, "How is it possible? Even the greatest human magicians can't do that." Adele said that his investigation was incomplete, as the Paris family's poisonous parasite can eat mana from the host's body. Ray's heart was about to explode due to the excess mana, and the parasite eats mana. Knowing all these details about Ray makes him believe his own words, and he actually looks the part. Kyle began to believe Adele's words and asked, "What do you want from me? Since you told me all this and didn't kill me or her, you must want something." Adele said, "I don't like the way you're talking. Don't forget that your life and your sister's life are in my hands," he said. Kyle understood what our hero meant and said he understood. When Adele realized that the trick worked, he went after him and told him that there were two things he needed to do. First, he must send false information to the Imperial Academy via the transmitter, that Seitan is attacking the third graders who are candidates for the Champions League. Kyle refused to do so because Sitten would attack the other classes. Our hero, knowing that Ray is at the academy, tells him not to worry because he can guarantee her safety if she cooperates with him. Kyle reluctantly agreed. Our hero then made the second request, which was to withdraw from the academy. Kyle was surprised and asked why, and Adele said he had things he wanted to do outside the academy. He said he wanted to gather information about secret places, rumors, and news of the demon world. This time, Kyle didn't object and agreed immediately. We could see that he was very pleased with himself, not realizing that his simple politeness would lead to better things. After all, when his civility is exposed, he's already been dumped, so Quis is taking advantage of Kyle's skills as a spy. Suddenly, Kyle speaks up and tells Adele that he'll do everything he asks on one condition. Adele doesn't like it, but asks him what the condition island. Kyle said he had to get the Demon Lord's contract, and if he doesn't, it doesn't matter if he kills him or his sister, he still hasn't done anything. Adele was shocked by what he said. The request surprised Adele. The Demon Lord's contract is not something to be taken lightly. It is used for very important contracts. It is a binding contract, and if it is broken, the Demon Lord has the right to take the traitor's soul. It's a serious matter, but at the same time, it's like a chain around Kyle's neck. Kyle insisted on his request and asked Adele if he would accept. Adele agreed, but planned to put a loophole or two in the terms so he could break it if necessary. Adele told Kyle that making a contract like this is something only good magicians can do, and asked him if he had one. Kyle admitted that he didn't. Adele's face showed signs of distress as he asked him, "How can you be so sure?" Kyle replied that he wanted Adele to answer him himself, figuring it wouldn't be a problem for him. Adele understood that he would have to provide the contract himself, because no student can afford something like this. But then he had an idea, maybe Mr. Ruppelt could have won. He told Kyle that he would try to get the contract by the end of the day, and extended his hand to seal the deal. Kyle accepted, pleased that he had won a useful trump card. Adele's smile returned for a moment, but the thought of their current situation took away that satisfaction. Even with the misinformation Kyle had given the humans, passing the midterm exam against the Imperial Academy was still a long shot. The chance was very slim, and he needed to cut a few more pieces off the board to ensure victory. The next morning, Mr. Ruppelt was in the middle of studying when he heard someone knocking on the door. To his surprise, it was Adele. Mr. Ruppelt quickly got up, greeted him warmly, and told him that he had come as they had agreed. Adele confirmed it, and the professor told him to sit down. Ruppelt asked Adele if he would like a cup of tea, to which Adele replied with a polite smile. On the tables, with candles around them, intricate magical formulas covered the surfaces, and it was clear that the professor's work went beyond books and into the realm of magical rituals, which is exactly what a magic teacher's laboratory is supposed to be. In our hero's eyes, the professor starts pouring tea and says he's glad he came, but Adele says he should be thanking him for his hospitality, and asks if there's anything he can do for him and why he called him. After adjusting his glasses, Rupert revealed that there was indeed an important matter. Adele picked up on the signal and realized he was definitely hiding something, so he asked him if he was afraid to reveal his secret. Ruppelt consulted with his hand, dismissing the idea and saying it was not something one could easily talk about. Adele seized the moment and offered to sign the Demon Lord's contract to guarantee confidentiality. Ruppelt was immediately intrigued and said he could tell him if he did. Just as Adele signed, the professor actually had the contract. With a wave of his hand, a crimson energy formed in the form of a piece of paper with the terms written on it. Adele was surprised by the speed of the matter, and the terms were that Adele would not reveal Ruppelt's research materials, that he would help him until he achieved significant results, and that in return Adele would receive a reward. Adele asked if this had been prepared in advance, and Ruppelt's hesitant smile gave him away. Adele took the paper and asked for a minor adjustment. If the research is beyond his capabilities, he has the right to withdraw and return the honorarium. The professor agreed and asked him how much compensation he wanted, and Adele replied without hesitation. 3 bottles of high-quality mana potions and a demon lord's necklace. The professor grimaced at his expensive request, thinking that the mana potions would be enough, as they are necessary for our hero to maximize his mana return as soon as he takes them. After much thought, Rupert accepted, saying that the potions were still a lot cheaper than the elixirs, and then handed the contract to Adele to sign. Before he did so, he asked Adele why he chose him out of all the students, as there are many students who are more talented than him. Roblet explained that he had gone to older and more talented students, but none of them had proven to be suitable for his research. Samuel, a first-year student, rejected the subject completely and said it was too much of a hassle for him. Adele didn't like the response and signed the contract under a pseudonym instead of his real family name. The paper burned with a deep crimson flame and turned into an energy that entered his chest. The professor announced that the deal was done and asked him to start immediately, and our hero was amazed at the way the contract was concluded. Roblet pulled a book off the shelf, and as soon as he did, the bookshelf slid sideways, revealing a secret passage. Adele wondered if the principal and the other teachers knew about the existence of this place. The teacher said to follow him, and when they arrived, our hero discovered that it was a secret underground laboratory. There was a book on the reading table, and Roblet explained that he was doing research on it and thought it was an ancient artifact. Adele was a little surprised and said it looked really old. When he opened it, the first page was completely blank. Before he could ask, Roblet said that most of the pages were blank and that only the last page had writing on it. Out of curiosity, Adele asked where he found the book, and Roblet explained that he found it by accident in an abandoned house. Adele didn't understand, so Roblet added that he found it when he was on a trip in the western desert and came across a lonely house in the middle of the sand dunes. Adele had a hard time believing this, but Roblet insisted that there used to be a large oasis beside it, and that it was likely the remains of an old village, but that everything else had been wiped out, adding that this was just a hypothesis. Afterward, Adele asked to see the words on the last page. Roblet put on a smiling face and explained that this was exactly why he was asking for help. He started turning the pages of the book and asked him to look at the last page. There was a short phrase written in an unintelligible handwriting. Roblet said it was completely unintelligible writing and asked if he understood anything. Adele wondered how he was supposed to know the distorted letters. He said that the other students had failed for the same reason. When Adele asked him if he had made any progress, he admitted that he had hit a dead end every time and hadn't made any progress. Our hero asked if there were any clues in the vicinity of where the book was found. The professor said there were no useful clues in the nearby villages. Strangely enough, no one knew anything about the abandoned house or the origin of the book. Adele frowned, realizing the difficulty of the task. He didn't want to come back with empty hands. He reached out and touched the page, hoping to find a clue, and began to move his fingers and felt a surge of power. An energy was released from the book and the pendant around his neck, and he asked himself why it was reacting. The words on the page began to move and dance before his eyes, vibrating with the same strange force. Adele couldn't believe what he was seeing and wondered if it was an illusion. Suddenly, the animated letters turned into a clear message that could be read, saying, "Challenging the system was tough. Everything fades and disappears, and annihilation continues unceasingly until the end of the world." Adele was able to read the words, although their meaning was still a mystery to him. The pendant's reaction suggested a connection to the demon lord. Ruppelt, who has never seen any of these strange phenomena, noticed Adele's expression and asked him if there was something wrong. The professor's eyes widened when Adele announced that he had deciphered the code. Adele read what he could out loud, admitting that he still didn't understand the meaning. Roblet compared Adele's words to the strange passages on the page, and, to his surprise, found that they matched perfectly. He suggested that the text might have something to do with his chaos trait, something that would definitely be worthy of deeper research. He admitted to himself that this discovery would not have been possible without Adele by his side. After his excitement subsided, the professor commented that more research is needed to find out more details, but what they found is indeed an important discovery. Since further research would require additional books and artifacts from the same area as the book, Roblet officially declared that he no longer needed Adele's help, emphasizing that his contribution had been more than enough. Before Adele could walk away, the professor announced that he would pay him his reward immediately. Adele was surprised and asked if this meant he would get his bonus right away. Noblesse assured him and asked him to wait. While the professor was busy getting the mana potions, our hero expected that it would take a long time to get the potions, not to mention the demon lord's contract. Suddenly, had an idea and thought to himself, doesn't the professor want to study more ancient artifacts and books? Then he looked at his neck. He removed the necklace from his neck and noticed that 3 of the stones in it were glowing with a bright red light, probably due to the power of the book. He wondered what would happen if they all lit up at once, and thought about handing the necklace to Noblesse to study, since he wasn't going to use it anyway. But he quickly dismissed the idea from his mind. The artifact's association with the demon lord made it too valuable to hand over, and his trust in the professor was not absolute. Noblesse returned with 3 mana potions, putting them in a bag with the necklace to make it easier to carry. Adele thanked him, but the professor insisted that most of the credit belonged to Adele, and said that without his help, the old text could not have been read. He expressed his hope that they would continue to work together in the future. Adele responded with a smile, emphasizing that he would gladly help him again. Before he left, Noblesse thought the research should be kept secret, and with a sly glint in his eyes, Adele said that the question of secrecy depended on what the teacher would do. This comment surprised Noblesse, who asked if Adele was hinting that he might breach the contract. Adele stood confidently and asked if the teacher's work had the approval of the academy's director, and pointed out that the mere existence of their secret agreement is proof of the opposite. As if he had permission from Saitan, he would not have resorted to it, and his confusion would give him away. Our hero went on to explain that if the research became public, the professor could lose his position. Noblesse shuddered at the prospect, and Adele extended his hand in a seemingly friendly gesture, emphasizing that they were now in the same boat and that he would do his best to help him to the end. And then, with a happy smile, he asked for an extra bottle of mana potions in exchange for his silence on the subject. Reluctantly, Noblesse pulled out the rest of the potions and handed them to him. Adele thanked him and said goodbye as he headed for the door. Before he left, the professor called out to him and asked him what he was going to use the contract for, and Adele answered without hesitation that it would be used to recruit a slave. The day passed quickly, and by evening, Adele arrived at the warehouse where Kyle was waiting for him. Kyle stood with his arms folded and said that they should skip the pleasantries and get right to the point, and asked if Adele had the demon lord's contract. Our hero thought to himself, this idiot is really boring. He pulled out the contract and asked if they could start right away. Kyle looked surprised and admitted that he didn't expect Adele to get it back to him so quickly. Adele was surprised, thinking that this was his suggestion in the first place, and warned him that there was no going back now, as a promise is a promise and breaking it would have consequences that no one would like. Adele asked Kyle to review the contract carefully and sign it. Kyle read the following terms. First, Adele must not harm Kyle or his little sister Ray, and ensure that Ray's illness does not return. In return, Kyle must put Adele's orders above anything else, ensuring that no task will directly cost him his life. Kyle seemed satisfied, so he agreed, and the contract was buried in a crimson energy that entered his heart. After the contract was finalized, Adele pulled a folded piece of paper out of his jacket and handed it to him, saying, "This is the first order." The paper contained the misleading information that Kyle would pass on to the human world. Kyle agreed and activated the communication ball to reveal a blue flash. All he needed to do was insert the paper into the slot and the message would be instantly tracked. Our hero was amazed at the strange method, but it made sense, given that opening a portal the size of a person would require a huge fortune and astronomical amounts of mana. Kyle said the machine recharges automatically and can be used again after a month. He added that once humans realize that he sold false information, they will think he fell into a trap and the machine will be useless. Adele countered that it's not a trap, but a mutual agreement. Kyle just sighed and told him to think what he thinks, and think about his next move. Adele ordered Kyle to leave the academy before the end of the day, and start gathering information about the demon realm, hidden places, ancient clan tales, lost histories, and ancient relics. He asked him to first focus on finding the location of nearby hidden places and the Seven Sins family, and to send reports every 2 weeks. Kyle accepted the assignment without objection. Adele said that Kyle's nature as a spy made it easy for him to quickly comprehend and absorb information. Suddenly, Kyle held out his hand. Adele was surprised and couldn't believe that he was extending his hand to shake it. Our hero shook his hand and said he was looking forward to working with him. Then, all of a sudden, Kyle slapped his hand and said, "You're talking nonsense and give me some money if you want me to gather information." Of course, our hero was surprised and forgot about it, but he only had a few bucks. He turned his back and told him to wait a little longer, which made Kyle even more uncomfortable. After a moment, Adele turned around and told him to give the paper to the Paris family, assuring them that they would help him, and warned him not to open it under any circumstances. Kyle shook his head and said he would leave as soon as he officially submitted his withdrawal from the academy, surprising Adele with how quickly he was ready. Kyle walked first, muttering to himself that there is nothing more disgusting than being surrounded by insects, so he might as well pass up the chance to see them again. In the days that followed, Adele's classes returned without incident. From the moment the contract was signed, Kyle completely disappeared from the academy. When word of his withdrawal spread, Adele's name was briefly mentioned because of the restaurant incident, and even Luna complained about him. The teachers were a bigger concern for him, especially Eris, who seemed convinced that something was fishy, but didn't have enough evidence to confront him. It's only a few days until the midterm exam, and changing the class president at this time would cause chaos. During one of the lessons, the teacher gathered the students for an important announcement. She told them that the midterm exam would begin in 3 days and would cover 4 subjects: weapon techniques, human understanding, magic, and practical training. Then, with a smile full of excitement and cunning, she revealed the last detail and said, "The practical part will include an invasion of the human school, the Imperial Academy." Adele allowed himself a slight smile, thinking it was finally time. In his mind, this was the true beginning of the original storyline. Imagine the chaos to come. Flames consume the academy, demon forces storm the Imperial Academy, and humans fight back. In the midst of the chaos, hidden villains would emerge, and battles would break out all over the field. Ran stood firmly with her hands on her hips, announcing that first place in the midterm exam would be hers. Her classmates shouted encouragement, assuring her that no one else could do it, and urging her to kill the class representative and take his place. Ran laughed as she asked those around her to bow to her. Adele, watching her, thought he didn't need to kill anyone here, because the whole class seemed to be under some kind of hypnosis. He whispered to himself that the results of the survival assessment had deteriorated since then. He sensed the atmosphere and concluded that since the humans had been so lenient in the previous encounters, it was no wonder his teammates were excited now, and he figured it was better than seeing them paralyzed with fear or confusion. If the story had gone the way he had written it, all the students in Class A would have been wiped out in the midterm exam. But he still had hope, and since he knew endless details about the near future, he was able to provide the Imperial Academy with misleading information. He even saved Luna, who had healing powers, from expulsion. He looked at Ran and recognized that he couldn't bring down the Imperial Academy, but he could save his teammates from death. He felt that this would earn him a good rating as class representative, gain Ares' trust, and, above all, give him another chance to enter the armory. He decided that his goal for the midterm exam was simple: live well and get the highest score. He told himself that he would have to do everything he could afterward. Renee approached him and said it had been a long time since they had last seen each other. He responded with a friendly smile and said he felt like it had been months since they last saw each other. After studying her features, he realized that she was really angry. There was a red halo around her, and she accused him of avoiding her. He remained silent, recognizing that she was right. He made excuses every time she suggested they practice together. And now he was the one who called her on the night of the midterm exam, so she had every right to be upset. But he wondered why the two of them were walking together. He saw Diana next to Renee, and Adele was trying to hide his annoyance that they hadn't been together for so long. The girl greeted him and introduced herself as Diana. He shook her hand without replying, thinking to himself that the more one avoids one's fate, the closer one gets to it. Diana tilted her head and said that the fact that he ignored her greeting made her feel a little resentful. Confused, our hero finally introduced himself as Adele Bixby, and said it was an honor to meet a lady of such noble birth. Renee sighed and pressed him to explain why he had been avoiding her all this time, and then asked them to rehearse now. He claimed he felt guilty. I asked him why, and he said he regretted that he couldn't stand by her side as a bodyguard. She sharply rejected his explanation, and he replied that she was cruel for not understanding his feelings. Adele realized that she wasn't convinced, so he decided to resort to another tactic he didn't want to use. He told her that he really meant what he said, and to prove his intentions, he brought her a gift, an energy potion that he gave with both hands. Diana came closer as she examined it and said it was a mana potion. He confirmed her words and said it was hard to find. Diana commented that these potions had become rare after the war. Diana urged her to accept and forgive him. Adele thanked her for turning her hatred into charity. Renee cut her tooth when she refused, saying she didn't need it. Our hero realized that she was really angry. She started to speak, but he interrupted her and said that as a half-demon, he had been bullied by the other students and kept his distance from her to avoid causing trouble. He got down on one knee and said that if this caused her pain, he was truly sorry. He raised his eyes to her, begging her to believe his trick. Diana crossed her arms and told Renee that he was a very sincere guard and obviously cared about her. Renee was silent for a moment before a slight smile crossed her lips, and she said she was fine. Adele asked if that meant she would accept the potion. She explained that she was hurt by what he had done, and he said he understood. Diana said she was happy for her and called her "my lady," while Renee asked Diana not to talk to her like that. Diana laughed with her and said that Renee would be perfect if she could learn to let go a little. Adele found Diana's humor unexpected. Renee suggested that since it was getting late, they should start practicing. Our hero agreed immediately. At that moment, Diana asked them to stand up and whispered to Renee that she should show her bodyguard her new technique. This was news to him, so she must have learned something while they were away from each other. Renee warned him and told him to keep an eye out. Black mana flowed around her as she raised her sword. The energy was dense and incredible. He watched as the mana gathered at the tip of the sword and turned black. A sudden sense of power shook him. This was the Black Sword skill, a human technique on par with that of an expert-level knight. Demons usually form their mana into weapons or strengthen their bodies with it. But for a daughter of one of the 7 deadly sins, to be able to use it like that to stay above the fray was to be expected. After she finished her performance, Adele said she wasn't perfect. She told him that she had to concentrate to the maximum in order to use it. That's when he invited her to a duel. Renee accepted the challenge, and our hero decided to test her technique with an ordinary dagger. He rushed towards her with their swords clashing, and she made a surprise attack that caused him to stagger backwards. After dodging the blow well, he adjusted his stance, and using his sharp eyesight, he was able to see her movements. So he started following her and realized that it might actually be possible. Her eyes flashed as she changed positions, and the sword glowed black and formed. In an instant, when they bumped into each other again, his dagger broke. Adele was amazed that she was able to form the black sword so quickly, and he sighed, admitting in a loud voice that producing a black sword with such power is an extraordinary feat. Renee replied that this is to be expected. Diana noted that it was rare for a noble woman to surpass her bodyguard in skill, and told Renee that she was truly amazing. Diana chuckled slyly, noting with admiration that Renee was blushing, which was unusual for her. Diana's eyes twinkled as she admitted that the more she sees her bodyguard, the more curious she becomes about him, and commented that he looks normal, but he's not, and she wants to know why. Adele's body stiffened, and Diana stood with her armor clasped, and a slight violet aura wrapped around her body. As Adele fell silent, he thought about how one of Diana's main functions, deep vision, enables her to notice even the smallest details, down to the tiniest strands of hair on a person's body. Adele found it fascinating to see the interest of someone destined to be the next demon king. He wondered how he might react, and thought it might be best to keep his distance from her in case she might be his greatest enemy one day. Adele let out a killing intent. Diana was slightly surprised, then allowed a slight smile to form on her face as her eyes began to glow. Our hero was surprised when he realized she was smiling, because most people are terrified when they sense murderous intent. He wondered if this was the calmness of the strong. Suddenly, Renee asked Diana who exactly she was curious about. Diana approached her, explaining that the fencing technique Renee had shown earlier was very special, and that's what piqued her interest. Adele also admitted to being curious and asked how exactly the black sword technique works. Renee explained that it's all about the sensation of filling the sword from the core, and that this is how the technique works. Our hero admitted this to himself, realizing that this is why geniuses are considered different from normal people. He then said that they needed to study for the upcoming exams, and that they should finish training today. Renee agreed, and he asked her if she was well prepared for the midterm exams. She replied that she was fully prepared. Seeing the confident look in her eyes, he began to think that the timing of the first midterm exam did not coincide with the hero's group obtaining the eye vanity, which meant that Rini's survival rate was high. On the other hand, it also meant that students from his class A were more likely to die. He wished her good luck, and she reciprocated by asking him to be careful. Diana smiled at him and promised that they would meet soon. As he watched her walk, he felt as if he had caught someone else's attention. There was a bird pecking at the crumbs on the edge of the window, and the morning light flooded the academy. Finally, the midterm exams would begin. Adele told the bird that Aries wouldn't even eat the bread crumbs. He was just using him like an idiot. He told her to eat quickly so he can go to the exam, adding that the first subject of the day is understanding humans, and he's been up all night studying, yet he doesn't understand it. Our hero whispered that he himself is the author of the novel and doesn't understand the subject. Isn't that ridiculous? Still, he thought that with some last-minute revision, he could at least get a passing grade. But as soon as he entered the classroom, everything he had remembered evaporated from his brain. Luna asked him if he was pushing himself too hard and said he didn't look good. He reassured her that it was fine and asked her if she was ready. She replied that she wasn't sure, but she didn't expect to fall. Adele asked Ran about her preparation, to which she replied with a smug smile and said that there was no point in theory or writing. All that mattered was that she got good grades in the practical training. Adele thought that if he wanted to increase his chances of survival by even 1%, he shouldn't spoil her like that. She needs to be educated. But she announced that she was going to take first place anyway. The teacher came in and ordered everyone to sit down and put the books away, and warned that cheating would result in expulsion from the exam. The hall was filled with the sounds of pens and the rustling of paper. Thanks to his attentive and focused qualities, along with his quick revision, he found that things were going better than he expected. But when he turned the page, he froze. The next question was, how do you feel about humans? This question was not included in the final grade. For someone like Adele, whose family was crushed by humans, the answer was obvious. However, he is neither with the humans nor with the demons. He is the author of the story and more like their father, because he created them. It was hard to decide which side was right. Anxiety got the better of him, so he looked back at the essay and decided to write an answer that would satisfy Satan, thinking it was safe to write what the demons wanted to hear. The bell rang and the proctor announced that time was up, ordered the paper to be turned in, and explained that the next test would be in weapon skills. Instructor Aries came out and said that each student would demonstrate their current level of close combat with any weapon of their choice to show how far they have come. But no one is allowed to withdraw from a fight because of fear, and he said loudly that fear is no excuse for backing out. He called for the first one to be tested to advance. Adele thought it was terrifying. They wanted them to fight with all their might as if it were a real battle. Even Ran was trembling. The first candidate lunged forward, but was knocked down and rolled on the ground. Our hero said the bastard had no mercy. Aries snarled at the group, calling them weak, and Adele thought the coach wasn't holding his own. Everyone was getting beaten in seconds. Even though he only uses his hands, no one can touch him. He then called out to Samuel and told him to do his best. Samuel responded with determination and his green mana enveloped him with a powerful aura. Seeing the increase in power, the coach commented that Samuel was more talented than he expected, and announced that he would use a little more power this time. A red aura licked along the blade of his sword as he advanced. The black sword surprised Adele, but Aries' sword was a bright red color, showing its fiery properties. It was as spectacular as expected from Aries, who rushed in to smash Samuel's green attack. Samuel returns to Laura, but doesn't give up and hits with another wave of attacks. The coach said it was great that he was able to regain his strength so quickly. Aries rushed in, attacked and broke all the attacks, and then stood in front of Samuel and hit him in the abdomen. Samuel staggered and then fell to his knees, clutching his stomach. The coach asked him if he wanted to continue. Samuel raised his hand to get the green mana from behind Aries, and bit his shoulder. The trainer looked at the faded image of Samuel's mana monster before cutting it, and then praised him for using a surprise attack. Samuel fainted. Aries ordered him to be removed from the testing area, then consulted the class and called out the next name in a loud voice. Come on, Adele. We see our hero Adele approaching Aries, who says, go ahead. Adele says to himself, that's a terrifyingly lethal aura. Even if you're not going to kill me, you obviously want to take at least an arm or a leg. And then Aries says, here's what you have, eat it all and show me. He says, Adele, just wait a minute. He says, Iris, do you have anything else to prepare? He says, Adele, there's only one thing I want to see. He says, Iris, you want me to show you exactly what to do. Adele, I want to see you cover your sword with sword energy from the start. He says, Iris, sword energy is not something you can imitate just once while watching. You have to really absorb it. Adele said, no. If I only see it once, I think I can feel it. So Aris does that and says, you've got a lot of nerve. Okay, just one more time. Concentrate. Wes. And Aries is already transforming into a very terrifying energy and Adele is thinking to himself, in an instant, the red mana has compressed and coated the sword. Terrible thing. And then Aries says to Adele, do you think you can do it? He says, Adele, thank you for showing me. And then Adele says to himself, you can't use it just because you're trying to understand it with your mind. He says, Aries, I'll admit that you have talent. Then Adele says to himself, it's not much, right? It's only 5 seconds, but it's worth a try. Adele pulls out his gun and says, let's go. And Aries says, okay, come on, come on. Samuel is sitting with Luna, who is using her magic. On the other side, our hero and Aries are in a fierce battle, and the two of them are bumping into each other and Aries says, you just covered the sword, and you're waving it around like it's a parade. He says, Adele, thank you for the compliment. Then he attacks him, but Aries parries the attack and there's a very powerful explosion. and Ares thinks to himself, now's my chance. He activates his Dark Fang Black Sword X3 ability. He then attacks him, but Ares is able to dodge the attack and says to himself, this is nothing. With a powerful shield around him that blocks all of our hero's attacks. Adele thinks to himself, what a huge body this island, and yet his reaction and defensive aura is unbelievable. Even a black sword can't get through. It's almost a monster. Ares is about to hit Adele, but suddenly he gives up and Ares is shocked, along with all the students, and then Adele says, I told you no escape is allowed. My 2 shields that I used to block are injured, and I'm out of mana, so I can't fight anymore. Adele tells himself that getting injured before the practical exam will only hurt me, there's no point. Although I also gave up to spite him. Ares moves in and says, okay, go back to your seat. He says, Adele, thank you for understanding. And Ares gets very nervous and says, you're a hero. And he says, let's go next. Adele thinks to himself, I'm so terrified I can't even speak. You're getting even with the coach. No way. Even if he's half demon, a corporal is a corporal. The plan worked as well as I wanted it to, drawing attention with showy attacks, while at the same time making it look like he can't do anything. In practice, I have to be the obvious center of the class. If Fran is leading, as he was in the original story, Class A will be crushed. Samuel comes in and says, Adele, what's going on? He says, Adele, you're going too fast, but what are you saying? What are you saying? Samuel says, I asked you why. He says, Adele means, my mana was gone and I had no energy, so I gave up. Samuel says, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you why you're so strong. He says, Adele could have been born that way. He says, Samuel, that's all you have to say. Do I need another reason? I don't believe it. How can someone like you stay strong? Adele thinks for a while, swearing at Samuel, and then he says, what? You were born into a good family and you're using a power like gluttony. Samuel turns around and says, what? You worthless gerbil, take your mind off your words. Then he turns his back and walks away, saying, I don't know when I'm going to get rid of this shit. Then our hero thinks to himself, you've come out of nowhere and started fighting. I'm afraid I won't be able to do what I'm supposed to do in midterms. Laurel comes in and says, Adele, what made you do that? And Adele says, Samuel started it. Laurel says, that's not the issue here. Samuel has treated you badly, but I don't understand why you want to provoke his family. And Adele says, Adele, all because you brought his family. Compared to that, he must despise me because I'm half demon. Laurel says, so you really didn't know that Samuel is the head of the House of Greed. And Adele says to himself, Samuel's a freshman. How can he be the head of a family? No way. And Laurel says, just as you imagined, this child's family was destroyed long ago. Adele says to himself, that's why. It explains why he reacts the way he does every time someone brings up the family's history. During the Great War between humans and demons, all of Samuel's relatives were killed by humans, and he was the only survivor, so he became the head of the family. He, the real hero, Nam Hyun, says that Adele himself was originally from a family that was destroyed, but because I only controlled Adele's body, I couldn't really feel the anger or sadness that the real Adele felt. But Samuel, unlike me, must have seen and experienced the horrible tragedy with his own eyes. I always thought that things like genocide and family destruction were just events in a novel. But here, the characters I created actually lived and breathed. And then, Adele says to Laurel, I'll be more careful now. Laurel says, I've seen you like this and now I'm going to walk away. Adele says, good luck with your exams. Laurel laughs and then says, Abdul's worrying about me. That's child's play for me. Just sit down and watch. Fran, get out. Adele says to himself, not only do you have a high opinion of people, you also have a serious side. Okay, I have to prepare for the next exam. Adele tells Adele that the next exam is stealth arts and magic theory. Stealth is my specialty, so it wasn't a problem, and magic theory is mostly stuff I already know. So it wasn't difficult. The professor speaks up and says, you guys are doing great. Get enough rest until the practical exam. Adele says, thank God, of all the exams, this one was the easiest. I might even get close to a perfect score on the magic exam. Then he falls asleep on the table in front of him, thinking to himself, but the problem is the next practical exam. No matter how good I am in the written exams, if I die in it, everything is wasted. I'll be fine, right? But the thought of the practical exam makes my stomach turn. Then Laurel would come in and say, did you do well on the magic test? Adele says, okay, I think I did well. What do you think, Fran? Laurel says, Laurel, you're laughing. Guess what? Adele thinks to himself, she must have gotten a perfect score in her specialty subject, the magic exam. If I don't suck her off, she's going to kill me all day. Sure, I'm sure you got a perfect score. Adele says, it doesn't matter. Since you probably failed miserably in weapon skills, what do you want to brag about? The two of them are quiet for a while, and then Laurel gets nervous and says, what did you just say? Adele says, oh, it's my fault. Adele then tells himself, I was busy with the practical exam and I made a mistake. But Laurel surprises Adele by punching him in the face. Balthan walks in, greets the other students, and then says to Adele, "Hey, it's okay, you look fine." He says, "Adele, it's been a long time, Palton." Then Adele says, "Why is he here all of a sudden?" And then Balthan says, laughing, "You still think I'm sweet. And you look stronger than the last time I saw you." He says, "Adele, thanks for the compliment." Adele then insults Balthan to himself. He says, "Balthan, I'd love to test myself against you again, but unfortunately, I have other things I have to finish today." Laurel says, "You're a jealous son of a bitch, aren't you? I thought I saw you at the entrance exam. That's the first time we've met since then." He says, "Balthan, and you must be Fran Laurel." "Okay, I'm going somewhere. Will you come with me?" Laurel says, "How dare you give me orders?" Paltan says, "There's a meeting this morning of all the class representatives. Even the headmaster will be there. You must be there too." Laurel says, "But I'm not the class representative. Honestly, my class representative is this boy." Balthan says, "What? You're the class rep? I'm really trying myself out in front of you. Can you give me some time?" Our hero thinks he's crazy and stupid, and then he says, "We'd better go to the first chapter meeting and show us the way." He says, "Balthan, come with me." "Laurel, you come too." Laurel says, "As long as I'm the master class representative, he should follow me." Balthan laughs and says, "You two are really funny, let's go." On the way, Adele says, "Why exactly is the chapter meeting going on?" Paltan says, It's about zoning. You all know that the topic of the midterm exam is the invasion of the human world, right?" Adele said. "Oh, I see. So this meeting is to determine which class will attack which region." "Oh, I realized it quickly. It's no wonder they chose you as the class representative. Even though you're a half-demon and the class representative, you look a lot better than someone with muscles, but no brain." And here we are. In the room, all the class representatives are sitting in the room, and we introduce them in order as follows. The representatives of Class C are Diana, Renee. The representative of Class D is Gawar. The representative of Class B is Iron. The E-class representative is Baltan. The principal of the school is Logan, who says, "Okay, come in, Class A representative, Adele." And Iron says, "What? He's the class representative." And Balthan says, "Yeah, thanks for making me come here." Diana says, "Honestly, your guard is pretty tough." Balthan says to himself, "I never told Renee that I was chosen as the class representative. Explaining it afterward would be exhausting." Then Principal Logan speaks up and says, "Now that everyone is assembled, let's get started. Please take a seat." Guar says, annoyed, "What a funny thing. Half a demon is the class representative, and the idiot behind him must have lost the position, even though he has the name 7 Deadly Sins. Imagine having to sit in a meeting with such insects. Even a contagious hellhound would laugh. Isn't that so?" Iron speaks up and says, "Well, you're not entirely wrong." And Adele says to himself, "What's this atmosphere? Is this really a meeting or a trap? I'm surrounded by enemies on all sides." Adele says to himself, "I just followed Beltane into the meeting room, but this is all nonsense. Even the headmistress looks like she doesn't know what's going on. Maybe they're doing this on purpose to test if I'm worthy. Then, I'll have to show them some of my strength." He says, "Gari, are you deaf or something? Talking won't help." He grabs him by the brain, but our hero dodges the attack and hits him with a very powerful fist. Gori lets out a very scary force, and Gori gets very angry and insults our hero. The two of them launch themselves at each other, and our hero manages to injure his hand. Then our hero catches them and is about to finish him off and put the knife in his eye. But Beltane stops them and says, "Enough already. Calm down and stay where you are." Logan, the headmistress, speaks up and says enough is enough. Adele, sit next to Iron. Laurel speaks up and says, "You're stronger than I expected. As expected of my slave." "Okay, now that that's settled, let's start the meeting. The reason I gathered you here is simple, to assign each class to the areas of the human world that we will attack during the hands-on training." Beltane says, "I've heard the general idea, but I'd like to know exactly where the starting point is and how they're going to divide the areas." Director Logan says, "You'd better see it with your own eyes instead of me explaining it with words." She pulls out a map and they see it in front of their eyes, and Beltane says, "Right, but surely you all know that this is no ordinary map. This is the map of the continent of the human world." Principal Logan says, "Right. Honestly, I was expecting Class A to attack this place, but I obviously underestimated their class representative. The place is the Imperial Academy. Attacking it is already the most dangerous mission in the human world, and yet she's telling us something even harder. Something happened that I don't even know about." The headmistress tells them, "According to the information we received from our spy, a class of first-year humans are leaving the campus for an off-campus training program to attack a domain." Adele says to himself, So, since one class of first years will be away from the academy, she thinks it's an easy target." From outside, First years are usually the weakest people, but the problem island. So, instead of the Imperial Academy, how about a class A that takes responsibility for a city? Laurel pauses and says, yeah, those little buggers aren't worth our time. Chapter A is going to hit the capital, Adele thinks to himself. Although our spies still can't pinpoint the exact timing, the heroes group has counted even the children of the seven sins. And in fact, in an inter-class competition after half a year, and their true strength will show. And one of the heroes' companions is in the class we're about to attack. If we bump into them, all classes except Baltan and Diana will be crushed without exception. So which district will get the best score? The area that needs to be separated? No, the area that I personally need to attack island. And then Adele says, Class A is attacking one of the first-year human classes. Gory speaks up and says, what nonsense, we have to go to the capital. Half-blood, preferably half-blood. See, afraid of humans, so I chose the easier option. He says, Adele, I should have poked you in the other eye earlier, then you wouldn't have been able to look at me. Gory swears at him, and the manager stops them and says, enough. Why did you choose the easiest target? I thought you were going to announce the invasion of the capital. Adele says to himself. They don't know, but the hero's classmate is in this class, and he's the worst possible opponent we could face. But that's why I have to go, even if it's risky. Because, in this place, there's an elixir, and it's only natural that one of the hero's allies will drink it. But I'll take it for myself, no matter what. And then Adele tells them, my thinking is based on my special ability. I'm exceptionally talented at assassination, so why should I make a mess in a city full of people? The capital is mostly a traffic area. Driving dozens of vehicles to assassinate, there is clearly reckless. Of course, if we get rid of all the witnesses, it won't be a problem. The director says, I see. You understand the geography of the human world, and your strength's better than I expected. In this case, there's no reason why you shouldn't. Class A will cost the first-year human students. Adele says, thank you. Okay, since I have to inform my classmates, I'll let you go first. Let's go, Laurel. As Iron walks away, he says, wow, he's a dueling guard, isn't he? Imagine having someone like that. Renee thought to herself, what Adele did was definitely a sword coat. He was still too close to show it. How could he do that? He was always good at hiding things. What is this? The pain in my chest. In the entrance exam, he said Beltane was a little stronger than average, but his growth is unusual. It really makes me want to fight him. Now, I understand why Coach Aries warned me about Adele. He even defeated one of the 7 deadly sins. The headmistress says, in this case, most people would try to prove their worth by choosing the hardest area, but he acted cautiously, wise and strong. He is an exceptional person. He is too promising to be abandoned based on Aries' warning alone. If raised well, he may become a good hound dog like House Arson. But if he can't be tamed, I'll have no choice but to treat him like the 6 human houses. Tomorrow, the practical training finally begins. I have to prepare well. A couple of our hero classmates are talking to each other that they heard that their class is going to kill the human heroes. Adele thinks, we were misinformed that we were going to attack the third-year dormitories, so the teachers of the Imperial Academy will be stationed next to the dormitories. Which means that with the first year, only one teacher will come out. If our predictions are correct, the magician will be from the 5th circle. This teacher, my goal is to hunt this guy down and kill him. Dealing with the hero's allies alone will be very difficult, so we have to take him out first. Then, from the secret lair, we'll take control of the elixir. That's when Coach Aries comes in and says, quiet. Guys, the headmistress has something to say. And the headmistress comes in and starts saying, trainees, the war begins now. You will meet the people who killed your parents, your brothers, your friends. Among the demon trainees, none of you have experienced this pain. You've all seen it with your own eyes. The people you love were killed in front of you, and you couldn't do anything, holding the bodies of your loved ones and weeping. And these despicable humans mocked us, insulted us, and even tried to defile the bodies. But now, it's our turn. Go out and hunt humans. Receive my blessing, Adele says to himself. This scene is really crazy. The principal's speech raised the trainees' spirits to the highest level. I can't believe it. Imagine her giving a blessing to so many people at once. Really monstrous. If she were my enemy, it would be very scary. One of the teachers speaks up and says, teachers of each class, calm your trainees. Guys, follow orders and board the train in an orderly fashion. This is the train to the dimensional station. Prepare to be shocked during transportation. We'll arrive in about an hour. Rest as long as you like until then, Adele says to himself. The dimensional station. Moving all those students at once must cost a fortune. But later in the story, Tepizet, more portals to the human world will appear. And in the end, the 2 worlds will be united in one dimension. In the train, Luna is talking and says to our hero, "Would you like to have? This is dried venison meat. It tastes really good." The system screen appears and it says, Sweat, Half Demon, Compatibility, Chaos, Talent, Relocation, 2. Qualities, Attention, Focus, Kill Intent, Darkness, Mana Manipulation, Eye of Suburbia, Telekinesis, Mana, 1381. Adele says to himself, "Time to check my current state. I'm still pathetic. Even though I practice the mana cultivation technique every night before I go to sleep, my mana is still that bad. An elixir is badly needed. I guess telekinesis isn't bad, at least." Luna starts to get weird, and he continues, saying to himself, "I only raised Luna a centimeter, but even that's enough to be useful in real combat. Telekinesis can't be ignored. It has to be improved, because eventually, it will turn into an ability that lets you control natural and supernatural forces, like you can control an entire planet. You can control gravity." The inspection is complete, but there's still one issue: the 6 horsemen of the apocalypse. In the original story, Feltz said that Adele died when he fell off a cliff, but the truth is, I fell into the demon world, carrying the identity of the traitorous House of Arson, so Feltz must be convinced that I died here. And of course, Principal Logan also knew this from her spies. Still, I'd better be careful. I need to get a mask to cover my face. The train arrives at their destination, and when they get off the train, they see a very large purple-colored crystal that is almost certainly a source of energy or mana. When our hero looks at it, he says to himself, "This is a magic crystal, isn't it? Just breaking a small piece of it can yield enough gold to live on for a year. What a waste. What a waste. They use all of it for a gate that will only be used once. If they were a little more careful, they could have done it for a lot less." Then the teacher speaks up and says, "Okay, you all have a general idea of where we are, right? Before we move, each of you will take an item. Then we can take something and say to ourselves, this island. Mask. Okay, I was still trying to figure out where to get one." The teacher puts it on him and says, "This mask has a spell on it that reduces perception. It will help you hide your identity." The teacher starts to transform and then says, "Don't worry, those who wear masks can recognize each other too. Class president, try it." Our hero tries it and sees the teacher's face and says to himself, "I'm not slow. It's clearer than I thought. I like it very much." The teacher says, "What do you think? You see well, don't you?" Our hero tells her that he sees very well and holds something in his hand and asks her what island. She says, "School. Food rations. 1 a day is enough to replace meals. I used to eat this stuff all the time during battles. It tastes like dirt mixed with the intestines of insects." Now, before we enter the gate, let me explain the testing system. First of all, the instructors will not enter with you. They're not coming with us. That doesn't make any sense. Who will lead us then? This is a test for the students. The objectives are set at your level. If we go in with you, there will be no test. Also, the instructors must stay behind to prepare the gate for your return. Therefore, from this moment on, all authority is transferred to the head of each class. All students must obey the orders of their leaders. This is the Enser flower, the symbol of Satan, which means you are the leader of the group. And take this map as well. The boss said you'll know how to read it. Then they start to open the gate and ask the students to enter. Our hero puts on his mask and thinks to himself, the preparations are over. For them, it's an unknown world. But for me, it's the hell I lived through before. And I'm going back, no matter what.